All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the officially unofficial watch party Rings of Power after party. I'm your host, Jen Gallagher, and I've got a really exciting show for you today. My co host, Michael Rowland, will be joining us for our second panel, which is a panel of lore experts who are going to dive deep into the Tolkien lore and pick apart this episode. Meanwhile, I will be leading the newbie panel where we will talk about the episode and evaluate the episode on its own merits. So, thanks everyone for joining us. Thanks everyone who's already in the super chat. We have a great show. There's a special guest, James Tauber, who will be joining us for the lore panel today. So, definitely stick around for that. Also, today we're going to talk about our featured artist, who is the Nerdy Alchemist. So, that is our featured artist of the week. If you look on the screen, you'll see his art here. He's got some fantastic stickers and art, a really cool Etsy shop. So if you enter code ROP Watch Party, you're going to get 20% off anything in his Etsy store. So please go check out check out the Nerdy Alchemist and get 20% off anything in his Etsy store using that code. Make sure you're following us on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook. We post weekly recipes and drinks, cocktails by Liquor and Lore, all for your viewing party. So check those out. This week was the steak and ale pie, plum heavies, and they were absolutely delicious. That was brought to us by Kitchen Overlord. So you can still go to kitchenoverlord.com and look up all of those recipes if you want to make them retroactively. We're going to have some wonderful, wonderful recipes for the grand finale, the season finale of the show, which is coming up next week. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce my wonderful newbie panel, and we're going to kick off the conversation. So this week, we have the lovely Lottie of Shell Cottage Radio, which is a Harry Potter podcast, joining us. Welcome, Lottie.
Hi, everyone. As always, I'm so glad to be here.
And this week, we have a new newbie. So please welcome Miss Aubrey Brunschwig, a graphic designer extraordinaire and show connoisseur. Welcome, Aubrey, to the chat.
Hi, here. I've been fangirling and
Awesome, awesome. We're so happy to have you. So this week, I'm going to give a very brief summary, and then I'm going to ask you both for your one-word reactions to the show and why. So we saw the devastation this week that was wrought by the eruption of Mount Doom. It opened on chaos, a scene of devastation, ashes, and terrible, terrible scenes of people who had been injured by the eruption. And also, we saw Prince Durin take matters into his own hands. We returned to the elves and the dwarves in that storyline. Lots to discuss there. We also saw the Harfoots part ways with the stranger, and a lot unfolded in that storyline as well. So, ladies, we'll start with you, Lottie. I'll get your one-word reaction to this episode and why.
Yeah. This week, it's a pretty obvious one. So I went with fire because there's fire everywhere. But I just want to say this. Yeah, we start off with fire everywhere and we end with fire. And in the middle, there's an interesting part about fire that I want to talk about later, though. Because I think there's not only just one side to fire.
Yeah, fire. Yeah, I mean, the fire scenes were a little disturbing. I have to say, they did not hold back when they were showing some of the injured folks in the tent with missing limbs and blood and burns. It was really intense. So, yeah, that's an apt choice of words. We'll go to you, Aubrey. What's your one word and why?
suspended because it felt like an episode that was a big climax episode. It felt very, very much like was filling this space between our season finale. What happened last week?
Definitely. Yeah. It did feel like it was a bit of a filler episode. It was very heavy on the dialogue and very intimate scenes, just one-on-one of characters, in conflict with each other. So it was a little less action packed and more, I think, focused on character development and the conflicts between two characters really coming to a head. So I want to take it from the Galadriel storyline in the beginning, when she wakes up. She's disoriented. The camera work is very disorienting in this scene. She's seeing all around her fire, and she does encounter Theo. And I think that in this episode, we got to see a bit of a softer side of Galadriel when she interacts with Theo and sort of takes him under her wing. So I want to get your thoughts on Galadriel this episode. Let's start with you once again, Lottie.
Hmm. Yeah, I loved it. I loved Galadriel in this episode, and I loved how they started. They did a really good job at portraying this whole despair that came over the land. It was like you said, they didn't hold back. You could see people were dying. People were still dying. Antimo is no more. And other characters, we don't know if they survived.
Yeah. Seeing
And
Antimo die was really that was an upsetting moment.
yes,
I don't know how you felt about that, but yeah, that was pretty tragic.
it was. And I felt like it takes a lot to Galadriel is a strong character. It takes a lot to knock her out. And to see her on the ground and covered with all that dust, and everyone's trying to save people, you can't see anything. The whole thing is we're all blind, until they get out of there. But they did a fantastic job with the colors, and it feels like the whole world is still burning. Yeah. And I love I think we get to that later. I love the conversations between Galadriel and Theo. They were really good.
Yeah, some wonderful dialogue there. I think that the dialogue between Galadriel and Theo may have been the best of the show, actually. We sort of saw the Galadriel that a lot of us have in our minds, the Galadriel of the Third Age, who's very wise, who is, more measured in what she is saying. She wasn't so impulsive. And I think it was a smart choice of the show to use Theo to bring this side of her out, to use Theo in this way. She sees this young, vulnerable person who she feels like she needs to mentor. And at the same time, she's sort of reminding herself of these things that she holds to be true, but hasn't necessarily been acting on. Right? She's sort of hasn't been behaving in a way that is typical of someone in her position or someone of her station. That's what I got out of it.
Right. It felt like she was also talking to herself when she told Theo at one point, it darkens the heart to speak good of evil deeds, right? And we saw her the episode before when she showed her dark side, and it was almost like she was reminding Theo, but also herself in that moment.
Yes. It was just absolutely so perfect to get to finally return to the person that I have pictured in my mind as Galadriel. So Aubrey, yes. I'm curious to hear your reaction also to Galadriel and how her plot played out this time. I think we're having some technological issues possibly with Aubrey's connection. So we'll just kind of skip ahead. Aubrey, you jump in whenever you can. That's totally fine if you can still hear us. I want to get to really what I think was the heart and soul of this episode, which was the dwarves and the elves. So Prince Durin and the conflict between he and his father. Some of those scenes I thought were absolutely so powerful. And the performance we got out of Owain Arthur was some of the strongest, I think, that we've seen thus far. Just so much passion and so much heat there. So Lottie, anxious to hear what you thought of those scenes. Worked for you, didn't work for you?
Someone said it earlier, I think, that to them it's the strongest storyline, Elrond and Durin. And I agree to some degree, because I love their friendship. I love their conversations, still bickering, and you can really feel, even though they've been apart for a while, Elrond is Durin's best friend. And I love when they said, you feel a little bit more like, even though you're an elf, you feel like a dwarvish elf, and Elrond said you feel like more like an elvish dwarf. That was pretty neat. And I absolutely adore Disa. She is really one of my favorite characters in this. I just want more of her all the time.
So good.
Yeah. Her passion. Yeah. Oh, so sorry, Jen, go ahead.
Oh no, I'm just so excited about this also. I love the scene when she's hammering. She's sort of angry hammering and talking to Durin, and I thought a lot of her dialogue was really interesting, that she's sort of winding Durin up and saying, we should go against the king and one day we will rule these kingdoms.
Yeah.
Sort of a little bit of a darker side of Disa.
I know.
This time.
It sounds darker, but at the same time, you can't help yourself but kind of agree and root for her, even though it sounds like, oh, we're going to take over and we're going to rule. But at the same time, I feel like she's going to be a good queen. Yeah.
Right. And I thought the tension was so great in this conflict because you see both sides. You see that, King Durin is concerned because he's concerned for the safety of his people. And when we see the Balrog at the end, it really underscores the reason that he's concerned. But then you have his son who's so concerned with helping his friend and the struggle there. So I think this was just a really smart conflict because really we as the audience were also so torn between these two conflicting motivations of the two characters. And that friendship, I think the friendship between Elrond and Durin, it's really wonderful. It's such a strong Tolkienian theme. Friendship and cross-cultural communication. So I think that is being done very, very well in this series.
Yeah. And I still have questions, though, about what's happening to the elves right now. Like, are they being poisoned by the darkness? How we see the darkness kind of goes away once it goes near the mithril. But are we talking about weeks or months or years until they would die without the mithril? To me, it's a little bit. I get where they don't have to explain everything to me, but a little bit more would have been nice in that regard. So it would make more sense why they're so desperate and what is I think Trisha would say, what's at stake? What's their, what are they sacrificing?
Right. Yeah. So we saw this week that when the mithril was put next to the leaf, the rot that was affecting the leaf totally cleared up. And I think this leads us to believe that mithril does have these healing properties. But I am curious, Aubrey, if you can, are you with us now? I think you're back.
I think so. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, you're a little quiet, but if you want to go ahead and weigh in on the mithril and the curative powers of mithril, I would love to get your thoughts as somebody who is not super familiar with the lore. Is this confusing? Is it totally clear what they're going for? Yeah, jump in.
Right. So I also I have to agree with Lottie. It's a little bit why the leaves are dying and why the mithril will help. My understanding is around the Cimmerils. The mithril in the show has with the light of the Cimmerils via this giant battle and an elf, right?
Yes. So in the show, where the elves are hoping that if they can get their hands on this mithril, it's going to restore them. And it's unclear whether or not the mithril will actually have those curative properties and affect them the same way that it affects the leaves or the tree. So I think it's a little bit ambiguous right now, and maybe intentionally ambiguous. But we were really less focused on that and more focused on, how is this relationship going to play out between Durin and Elrond, and Durin risking everything. I thought was so powerful, and I also really wrestled with it because he went against his father, and is he putting his own people at risk by helping his elvish friend? This is so countercultural for a dwarf to do this. This is such a big deal to defy your king and to help your friend. But I want to hear, Aubrey, is that storyline, did it bring you in? Did you enjoy it? Are you enjoying this friendship between the two?
I mean, they're so sweet together. I enjoy all of the scenes with those two. I think the scene with his dad was such a, that was a drag out fight.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was like, obviously this like father son relationship, but it also Durin's dedication to his friendship, that he would literally essentially point where he would be severing ties with his father to support, so that's like a, we saw over the course of the show that they have a dedication to each other, but this, I felt like oh, I'm willing to sacrifice familial relationship.
Yeah. I mean, I think the hard thing to watch is that we saw that there are going to be consequences to him siding with his friend. And so this was personally really hard for me to watch play out, because we know that they've now awoken a Balrog, and we still don't know what that means. If in the next episode, we're going to see the fall of Khazad-dûm, we don't really know yet. But it's a little bit painful to know that he has staked everything on this relationship with Elrond, and that it's not going anywhere good. I mean, maybe they'll surprise us, but seeing the Balrog was certainly kind of scary, and hopefully it doesn't all end abruptly. I mean, I hope we get a whole lot more of the dwarves and the elves. But I want to move to the Harfoots. Curious, Lottie, to get your reaction to the Harfoots this week.
The Harfoots make me hungry for apples. No, just kidding.
Yeah,
because they look so
fruit.
good.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But what I really like was the abrupt contrast between when we just saw that scene full of fire, injured, dead, and then it's like that we go to the Harfoots. They're just singing and walking. I mean, they then discover also something is wrong, something is not as it should be. But I love that we immediately feel comfortable once we go to the Harfoots. Everyone wants more scenes with the Harfoots, and to me, they're just those. I mean, they have their own characters that are not, 100%. They have their own issues, or like, what's her name? Malva wanted to leave some of the other Harfoots behind. But to me, in general, they are those innocent creatures who they don't have a king. They don't seek greater power. They just want to go and eat and sing and have a good time and be together with their families. So to me, seeing the later when their all their wagons catch fire or they set them on fire, that was like one of the saddest, most heartbreaking things ever.
Yeah, totally agree.
Oh, I think I jumped ahead. Yeah, I didn't. Sorry. Yeah, that before that it was when the stranger meteor man. It looked like again they're reaching out to him. He's attacking. It looked like he was attacking. What was her sister's name? I forget. He's attacking
little Harfoot.
Yeah, the little Harfoot girl. And Nori. But Nori, I think Nori this whole time, she had it from the beginning, that feeling, no, she can trust this stranger, even though everything sometimes tells her to run away. But I think, and finally we get the separation of a little Harfoot group joining the stranger. But yeah, I think it's awesome when they show that the stranger is actually, again, he does good things. They don't understand what he's doing, but he does good things.
Right. I mean, I think this week it was really, really tricky because it's clear that he is a peril to them. You know, we harken back to that previous episode where he says he thinks, am I a peril? And he's wrestling with that. And Nori's saying, no, you're not a peril. But they have seen twice now that he is accidentally causing them harm. And this week it was an accident that the branch fell when he was trying to restore the tree. But it's clear that just his being there is a danger to them. So they decided to part ways. And that was personally really heartbreaking, I thought, because Nori had vouched for him so hard. And you kind of see the inner struggle there. And I was very reassured to see that Sadak, helps him. He gives him the constellation and says, you're going to find your people. You go see the men and they'll help you, get back to where you belong and follow this constellation. And I am excited that a small band of hobbits is going to track him down, because I think it's going to allow us to focus in more on those characters, those 4 hobbits that go. I think we're definitely going to leave the caravan and just follow the story of these 4 little hobbits. So I'm really excited to get more there. Aubrey, do you want to weigh in on the Harfoots this time?
I too was excited about the foursome of hobbits. We are very familiar with a foursome of hobbits, Peter Jackson series from the Lord. There's a lot of fun references that can happen. I was very excited about that because I was very, very sad when ran away. I thought it was super sad, and of course, like the flower, like I show that's tried to point towards him being, is he evil, and they're definitely toying with the so I thought that the touch of the flower coming back was great, because I do think we can trust him, I hope. And then the scary appearance, that was, I was like, wow, all their a volcano, and now these guys show up, and it was a double whammy for
the poor Harfoots. Yeah, that scene was pretty chilling. Those cultists, the 3 cultists showing up, was I was hoping for more of them, actually get to see more of them, but I thought it was so smart to just have them show up and say nothing and do something so evil, because we're even more curious now about these 3 strangers. Who are they? What? It's clear that they're hunting the stranger. We don't know why, but they're definitely nefarious. They're definitely evil. Any theories from the newbies on who are these folks? And there's plenty of theories out there, but I'm curious to get your theories. What do you think? Lottie, we'll go to you.
Honestly, I think, next episode we're definitely gonna get more, because I don't know, at the end, after the when the episode's over, they sometimes show a little bit of the next episode, and I saw Nori, all of a sudden she had those eyes, just like them, very pale eyes. So now I'm very curious. I didn't expect at all that Sadok and Marigold are gonna go with them. I only expected Poppy and Nori to go. So that's gonna be interesting. Who they really are, I am clueless, honestly, because I don't know anything about what kind of folks should be around at that time. So I feel like I was confused, because Nori definitely is gonna have a connection with them somehow next episode.
You think
So I
Nori
feel
will
like
have
maybe-
a connection with the 3 cultists?
Yeah,
The
because
3.
her eye color changed. And
I didn't notice that.
that was after the episode is over. They show just a few scenes from the next episode.
Oh, yes.
So I saw that there, and I was confused, and I thought maybe they did something really evil, but maybe they are somehow important, or they're not as evil. I don't know, because they haven't talked yet, so I feel like maybe we need them later on. Yeah.
Aubrey, any theories about these 3 strangers?
Well, they're very spooky. But no, I think they look, but we don't know. I think they. Okay, this is resting. This is theoretically my thought that I am in one of the camps of man is a wizard. Theories. I have to think that they're either looking for him, as we saw, in the trilogy, the Lord of the Rings can use their power for good or evil. Either, I think, trying to, cut him off at the root him for evil. I don't know, who are they working for? We don't. Or, I mean, the other option, they clearly have magic powers, and so are they something that we don't really understand? And maybe they're not evil, but they're just so good that they would burn down Harfoot regardless of the how mean it is. But yeah, I mean, it'll be really interesting to see who are they serving. Essentially, is what I'm really curious.
Whom do you serve? In other words, yes. I'm curious to chat with you ladies about the dialogue. I had my criticisms of the dialogue in the Harfoots this time. Nori's father's speech, I had a few issues with that speech, particularly our hearts as big as our feet. Some of this dialogue just wasn't really hitting it out of the park for me. I'd love to get your reactions on dialogue. I think we talked about the Galadriel dialogue. We really enjoyed the Galadriel dialogue. We enjoyed the Elrond Durin dialogue. Harfoot dialogue. Your thoughts, Lottie?
I feel like it was, like you said, a little bit out of the blue, like that emotional. I mean, he should give, like Sadok said, just give him some time. I mean, all your things got burned, and a lot of things are happening you don't understand. It's important, actually. If you talk about mental health, it's important to give those feelings room and not just ignore them. But I also understand how he wants to, keep the spirits up and show resilience, show like, no, we can it's all just things, it's all interpretation. We can just keep going, everything will be fine. So I understand both sides, but I think like you said, he overreacted a little bit at that moment. But what I enjoyed was, and I had to chuckle a little bit when he said, it was very ironic, we don't slay dragons, not much for digging jewels, and you think about what's to come in The Hobbit. So that was a cute little
Yes.
moment, but yeah. Like I said, it wasn't the worst. I understand why he did it, but it came a little bit, I don't know, out of the blue. Yeah.
I think I'd agree with that. The one thing, this is taking a so, but I particularly enjoyed when talking to the tree and they ask what he's saying, small words so that the tree can understand. Mm-hmm. I thought that was sweet, and I also thought it was a very sort of, an explanation for bigger things that are going around. This understanding of like, oh, well, they're tired, so that they know. But I'd have to, I agree with Lottie on sort of the dialogue later, but also the character motivations. Something that came up while I was watching that we were like, the Harfoots are sort of, and I was like, they're sort of like, in the sense that like they stay safe a lot of the time, and they're trying not to get stepped on, trying to stay out of danger, and sort of played into maybe the dialogue feeling a little out of beach and stuff like that, because we're used to seeing
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think watching Nori sort of have this change of heart was a little difficult for me because she's been so stout this whole time and so adventurous. There's more out there, and this time she was saying, and I see why they did it, because her sister was hurt and it's causing her to evaluate her choices. But she was saying, well, I should have just stuck to the road. I'm just a Harfoot. That was a tough moment for me, because that she then decides to go after the stranger. So it was a lot of like major swings in her thinking, like almost too abrupt. It didn't quite all jive for me there. I am glad that they're going after the stranger, and I'm happy to see where that storyline goes. Even though I'm wondering if they're going to tie it into the larger story and how they're going to tie it into the larger story. I don't think that they're going to, but no spoilers, so we won't go there. But I want to move on to someone who's just a major topic, who was barely in this episode, but we have to at least touch on him. We've got to talk about Halbrand. We'll talk about Halbrand first, and then we'll talk definitely a little more about Theo and Bronwyn and Arondir in that camp. So let's talk about Halbrand. We didn't see him much, but he was found and he was wounded. He was found on the road. We don't know how he was wounded. But he then joins Galadriel and returns to Elven lands to be healed by Elvish medicine. So Galadriel says, this wound needs Elvish medicine. Nice callback to Fellowship of the Ring. So last week, the entire Newbie panel was firmly in the Sauron, Halbrand is Sauron camp. So how do we feel this week? How do we feel about Halbrand as a character? Any new or emerging thoughts? I know we didn't see him much, but I felt like he loomed large over the episode. We'll start with you, Lottie.
I had a few thoughts about, I wouldn't say I have a change of mind, because I still am not entirely sure. But in terms of who's Sauron, well, I'm going to start with Halbrand. It seemed a little quick for me that he was almost dying there, and then he was already up, walking around and on a horse, but maybe more time passed between those two scenes. It was very, very like, oh gosh, there's Halbrand, and he's almost, he's sweating, his wound's still bleeding, and then the next moment we see him outside, like, everyone's cheering for him, and
Mounted on a horse, like he seems
Yeah.
fine.
yeah. So
Running. The
I think anyone
was
who's ever been on a horse. Oh, I'm sorry, Aubrey. What did you say?
Oh, sorry. I was just saying, running on a horse probably would.
Mhm.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, with an open wound or a wound just started to heal, I think would feel pretty painful. He didn't say much, but because of the last scene, I have more thoughts about Adar, and I thought about what Adar had said, that he killed Sauron last episode. What if he meant, like, he killed Sauron inside of himself to leave, like, how some people say, I killed a part of myself to leave that behind and move on and have a fresh start, and be someone else. And I thought, I know John is not here today, because it made me think of the Wheel of Time, how they create so much mystery around who's the dragon in that show, and then in the end, it is the guy we all thought, oh, it would be kind of obvious if he was the dragon, and then it's him. So I thought, what if they did that to us, and Adar is actually Sauron, because now he's the king of not the what did they say, king or lord of the Southlands anymore, but Mordor. They created the name Mordor.
Yeah, how did you like that? It says the Southlands and then it says Mordor. Thumbs up, thumbs down. And chat, super chat, I'll ask you that as well.
Graphic designer.
We got a thumbs down from Aubrey.
Was not my favorite choice.
I agree, Aubrey was very heavy-handed. It was like, let the audience use we know that. We don't need to see it spelled out so clearly, right?
Just let him say it.
Yes, that's what I thought. Just
show the rest of the map.
Right, show the map.
Graphic designer in me did die a little.
The graphic designer in you died because of the font? Or just the way it looked?
It just like the right application.
Yes, I totally agree. It was verging on ridiculous to have it, clearly written out there. I thought that was also very cheesy.
I feel like showing it, they've already done a lot of map throughout the series. I think that would have been much more effective. Me looking, it was the combo overlay that was the problem.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, I couldn't break it down why it visually what didn't work, but I know enough to say just the fact that they had the Southlands and then fade into Mordor was really, really heavy-handed. And we know, or the audience knows, even the newbies can recognize this is probably Mordor, where the orcs are now comfortable. They can roam freely because it's dark. We can put those pieces together. We don't actually need it to be spoon-fed out to us. But I actually want to talk about another that I felt like was focused on in this episode before we have to wrap up, which was Elendil. So let's talk about Elendil and Isildur. Elendil thinks that his son is dead. He has this moment where he's grieving and he's angry. So I want to talk about Elendil as a character, the grieving father, and get your reactions to his storyline and whether or not we think Isildur is in fact dead. Lottie.
No, Isildur is not dead. I don't think so.
He says he's not dead. Yeah.
No, I actually think we might even, I don't know, maybe see him. They're going to the Numenorean settlement, right? Next, the humans, the Southlanders. So we might see him there. Who knows? But I can understand absolutely. He's a father. He lost his son. That's what he thinks, and he now regrets that he ever picked up Galadriel from the sea. But this is not how you can think about that. You agree to this. you're you're bound to protect your queen, and wherever it leads her, you got to go. And I don't think you can anything that almost like the butterfly effect. Anything you do has some sort of consequences or effects. And you cannot go around and say, "Oh, if I hadn't done that, had I not done that, this wouldn't have happened." But other things, maybe good things also, had you not done this, that wouldn't have happened. So it's his initial reaction to his loss, but I feel like he should be more professional, I would say, more of a leader in this moment, to say, to at least not blame Galadriel.
Right. We want to
That's how I feel
see
about it.
the Captain Elendil, but
Yeah.
but at the same time, he's lost in his grief, and he thinks his only, or his not his only son, but he thinks his son is dead. So he is really wrestling with that.
Yeah.
I think something that was really great about this episode is that we really see the characters wrestle with the consequences of their choices, right?
yeah.
So Elendil is wrestling with the consequence of losing Isildur. He thinks he's lost Isildur. We see Queen Muriel. Queen Muriel wrestles with the cost of the choice to go to Middle Earth. She is blinded by the coals and loses her sight, which I thought was, I did not expect that literally Middle Earth would hold darkness for her. Remember, in a previous episode,
Yes.
her father says, all that waits for you in Middle Earth is darkness. And it is a literal darkness, we come to find in this episode. But that was it was really a powerful thing to see these characters face the devastation that their decisions have brought on them by following this elf to Middle
Yeah.
Earth.
Even
Aubrey,
Galadriel. Oh,
even
sorry.
go for it. Galadriel.
She just said she's told Theo, you cannot burden yourself with those things. And then she says, I think, or you never, it's hard to ever take them off if you start burdening yourself, if you put it on your back, on your shoulders. And I think she's also talking about herself. I don't think right now she's wrestling with her decisions too. Even though she's still strong, she still wants to go forward, but she's trying to apologize in that moment to Queen Muriel. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah. Aubrey, Galadriel for you, and characters, facing consequences this episode.
So when they first put Theo on, it was kind of a weird combo, but then they have such that he or she, all these moments of self-reflection while she's trying to advise, right? Which is, I think, something we've been waiting for the whole series.
Yes.
You can kind of hear, which was nice, in some of her lines where her and she's like, oh, I need to listen to myself. That with Elendil, surprised to see the amount of emotion. Not that it wouldn't obviously your son, but the regret or the seeing that changed his dedication to the cause. Surprising.
Right. It seemed a little out of character to me as well.
Because he was the one in the first place, like, loyal, literally. So that was surprising and interesting to me. I was straying a little bit, but obviously, to me, the horse was a big sign at Isildur, just because in the series, in the Lord of the Rings series, we are very loyal to their kings or their writers. A little bit of a Lord of the Rings callback with the horse and Isildur.
Yes, I love the moment where he releases the horse. I think we all can guess where that horse is going. Um, he may be
Right.
going, yeah. He's
Would not be
probably
the
going
first
to find.
time.
That's right. It would not be the first time a horse went to find its rider. I also love that moment. And
True.
the cinematography there is so beautiful. Like anytime we get shots of the landscape, right? Just so, so stunning. So pretty. Well, ladies, before we wrap it up, I want to get your predictions for what happens. This is the penultimate episode. We are now going to the finale, the very last episode. I can't believe it. It went by so quickly. At least for me, I've been enjoying every second, the highs and lows. I want to get your predictions for the final episode, the eighth and final episode. So you can focus on a character, what will happen with a character, or you can focus on storylines and what happens there. Let's start with Lottie. Predictions for the final episode.
Some predictions I already mentioned well, I wouldn't call it a prediction, but Adar and my doubts. Maybe it is him. Who knows? But I want to talk about just the theme of fire. I'm kind of hoping we get more of how fire has not only destructive potential, but also fire. I don't know if you caught this, but Durin Senior said he talked about during Junior's sickness when he was a little baby, and how he every night held him to the firelight. In that moment, I was like, wow, this means fire is not only death and destruction, but also life and warmth and energy. And, we use it for cooking, for food and light. And it reminded me a lot. I don't know if you've ever watched Avatar: The Last Airbender, but I love how at the end of that show, they talk about the elements, right? And fire is that one element. This whole time we think they're the bad guys, they're destroying everything with their fire, but then at the end we learn fire is more than that. We need fire. It's breath, it's, like I said, it's energy. So I hope we get more, I don't know, more about that, how it can be something different. Maybe that ties into what the mystics are doing. So yeah, that's one prediction about that. And a second one, just that Numenor, this whole time I was curious what's happening in Numenor right now, because we still have Pharazôn and Isildur's sister back there, and I don't know, it feels like maybe they come back and it's ruled by Pharazôn, and we'll see a lot of tension definitely there, and maybe the queen is now weakened, she's challenged. Maybe the king is dead. I don't know. Yeah, something like that. So Numenor is definitely a place of tension now.
Yes. Ooh, I love that. Thank you for pointing out that bit of dialogue. I loved that scene where where Durin is talking to his son about, about putting him near the fire. And that's a really good catch, that we've seen the destructive things that fire can bring about, but hopefully we also see some positives, or even the show is called The Rings of Power, right? I think it's obvious that we're going to see the rings forged at some point. And we know fire will be
right.
a critical element in this story. So thank you for pointing that out. And I'll go to Aubrey. Predictions, and then we're going to flash the number on the screen. And if anybody wants to call in live and chat with the newbie panel before we sign off and hand it over to our wonderful lore panel, you can do that. We'll have the number up. You can call in live. And don't forget, if you're in the super chat, you are in the running to win pieces of art that are going to be raffled off by our wonderful artist this week. So, Aubrey, let's get your predictions for the final episode.
I hope that we're going to get on some things. I think for us to find out who Meteor Man is, get more insight. I think we'll see. I do think we'll see some more, especially like you said, the Queen Regent being blinded now. I did see Elendil's sort of cause fading as well. That that's like a player that we'll see tension in. I think that I think we might see Isildur coming back, and I'm really hoping we get a Harfoot adventure. Just can't wait to see those four setting off. Might also be like way to end this first season where ends where Sam and taking off on their own. So sweet to see something like that sort of happening. So yeah, I'm very, very excited.
Yes, me too. I'm excited for hopefully some of the cliffhangers to be resolved. And I know that there'll be new cliffhangers. They're not going to wrap everything up. It looks like we haven't gotten calls, but so I'm going to let you ladies go. I want to thank you both for your time and your insights. This was really wonderful. And I hope that you will join us, both of you, next week for our final chat with our newbie panel. It's always fun to get the newbie perspective. And now we are going to say goodbye to our newbies. We're going to bring Michael Rowland up from Watch Party Podcast Network. He's going to come back on and he's going to introduce the lore panel. So we have a really wonderful lore panel this week with special guest James Tauber, who's joining our panelists to dissect, pick it apart, go deep, delve too greedily and too deep into Tolkien's larger canon to talk to all you nerds out there. And I am one of them because I will be listening and joining the super chat because I want some art. I would like this art. My goal is to have a wall of Tolkien art. So once again, our featured artist this week is the Nerdy Alchemist. So if we want to throw his stuff up there, if you enter code ROPWatchParty, you get 20% off his Etsy store this week. Super, super exciting stuff.
And that link is down in the description there as well, so you can just click on it rather than typing it in.
Click on the link.
Click
so
the link.
Easy.
Click the link, type in the discount code. You're good to go.
You're good to go. And don't forget, super chat. It's been popping off. I can hardly keep up. So if you're in the super chat, you may get a raffle ticket and you may win one of his pieces. So if you dig what you're seeing, please keep chatting with us. We're loving to hear from you guys. So welcome, Michael. Excited to hear from the lore panel today.
Hey, everybody. Good to see you. I love that newbie panel. And I was having some issues with my camera. I keep forgetting if I have another screen open with my camera activated, then it doesn't work. But I am here now.
The struggle continues.
I know. These are like serious problems. But yeah, I'm pumped to get into this lore panel. And, I think we can safely say, Jen, that this was the best episode of the season. And I know you agree with me, so you don't need to respond to that. You don't need to respond.
Polarizing.
I don't agree. This was very much a filler episode for me. I liked the more contemplative
filled with drama.
Yes, there was some heavy drama. And it was not a terrible episode, but it was not my favorite episode. But you know what? My favorite storylines are the Numenoreans and Adar. I love seeing Adar. And so those are my favorites. So this was naturally not my favorite episode, but it was not the worst episode. And I did really appreciate a lot of the longer monologues. Obviously, Owain Arthur was delivering just Oscar worthy, just beautiful, beautiful stuff. A lot of passion, a lot of range, emotional range. Bravo to all the actors. And his father. Oh my goodness, can't recall the actor's name, but
Peter
Also-
Mullen.
Mullen. Yeah.
Peter Mullen. Thank you. Peter Mullen is so fantastic. They managed not to be cheesy. I don't know. It would be so easy in those like ridiculous beards and ridiculous costumes to act in a way that is not over the top but is befitting of a dwarf. And that's just so hard to toe that line, and they both do it just beautifully.
Yeah, it's hard to convey really serious emotion when you're in a Halloween costume, basically, right? But they are these Halloween costumes are great. I mean, the aesthetics of the dwarven costumes and the cities and everything are just so spot on that I think it probably puts the actors right into the emotional center of the story. So I know we got a couple other panelists, and let's go ahead and get them in here. Jen already talked about the art and our recipes and all that, so let's just roll right into the lore panel. And I love this crew. We got a really, really full crew here today. Joining us as always, I don't think you've missed a week, is Strider.
Nope. I'm a bit borderline feverish, but I've got my Mirror War. I've got some Atalas tea. So, pushing through the sixth episode.
This episode made you really just feel flush, so hot with excitement. That's what I'm
Yeah, indeed. That's a good way to put
it. And we got joining us again from Fellowship of Fans, Hen. How are you?
Fine. A little bit buzzed, but very, very fine.
Okay. All right. I'll try and match that energy. And joining us for the first time from Fellowship of Fans is our own commander of the Northern Armies, King of the Elves, our own Adar, Harry, Fellowship of Fans, the father of the Fellowship of Fans YouTube channel. Hey, great to have you here for the first time this week, Harry.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. I have lost my voice a bit, but yeah, I'm excited to discuss.
Apparently, the whole Fellowship of Fans side is.
You guys, get it together.
It's been a wild week.
Yeah. Good. Sick, buzz,
Yeah,
no
very
voice.
sick.
This is gonna be a nail biter here. I like
Let's
it.
go. Let's
yeah.
go. Recovering from the sixth episode.
James, can you give us a full house? Are you suffering from some sort of malady this week as well?
I am not. I'm feeling great.
Yes,
right,
let's go.
That makes two of us. So let's officially welcome to the stream James Tauber from Digital Tolkien. I'm very, very excited to have you on. Thanks for joining us, James.
I'm thrilled to be here.
And for those who don't know, James is also co-hosting the Rings of Power wrap-up with Alan Sisto from the Prince Pony podcast. And that's been going great. I've loved your contributions. That show is just rolling right along without missing a beat. So I will confess I listen to that every single week.
Excellent.
So let's just dive right into it, and let's kick this off the way that we always do, which with just sort of an open forum. I want to go around the table and get everybody's thoughts about the episode, and I want you to do that by giving me one word that sort of sums up your feelings about the episode, the themes, whatever word comes to mind, word or short phrase. We're not going to hold you to it, and I'll kick it off here. My word is crisis, because I think all of the characters and all their arcs were hit a very important moment of crisis. We're leaving this episode. All the characters are in crisis, and they're branching off into sort of a new unknown path. Prince Durin has just been his father. Not only is that relationship hit a real big problem from a father-son perspective, but the king has just said, you are no longer the heir to the throne. And so that's a real big emotional crisis for Prince Durin. It's also kind of a political crisis. We see him talking to Disa, and they're almost plotting to not overthrow the king, but really go their own separate way and pursue their own ends, and they're not respecting the king's wishes. We see something similar with Galadriel after the Mount Doom erupts, and she sees that basically she blames herself for everything that's come to pass for the Numenoreans, all the death that she sees around her. She kind of blames herself, and we see a much wiser Galadriel dealing with the guilt of everything that's happened, and then reconnecting with Tarmiriel, who has her own sort of emotional crisis, actually a physical crisis. She loses her eyesight, and yet she is sort of reinvigorated and decides that she wants to. She was closer to the faithful than ever before, and she kind of picks Galadriel up in that way. And she's saying, we're going to come back stronger than ever. And then Elendil, who was of the faithful, is now just ravaged by the belief that his son is dead, and he's now kind of turning away from the faithful, or at least for a moment. He's dealing with that grief, and not in the strongest way. And then, of course, the Harfoots, their caravan is destroyed, which is the lifeblood of their community. And, that is a huge crisis for them. And at the end of the episode, they decide, 4 of them, they're going to branch off and chase the stranger down. They're going to go off path, right? So every single plot line, in terms of the relationships, the emotional core of their storylines, hits a major, major crisis, and they branch off in a new direction, which to me just feels like everybody is looking over a cliff going into the finale. And the finale, I think, is going to push everyone off the cliff. It's going to be, I think, really significant from just a dramatic narrative perspective. So usually I don't give such a long discourse on my feelings about the episode. I try and just be the host. But this is my favorite episode. I think it did the best job in terms of dealing with the actual character narratives. So crisis is my word. And I'm going to hand it off now to Strider.
Yeah, well, I think you summed up very well. My word was struggle or all rightish, one of those two. As usual, I always have some bones to pick with every episode, but it's like some chronic issues, so not necessarily something crazy that happened this episode. But the reason why I would go with struggle is pretty much a lot of things that you said. We are now dealing with the aftermath of what happened with, Mordor becoming Mordor, and what that's going to mean for everyone moving forward, for the whole continent, and of course what happened to the Harfoots, what's happening with the dwarves and the elves. There's struggles on multiple layers. Some are political, some are emotional, some are geographical, some are like existential and so on. But yeah, a lot of struggle across the board, and I'm very excited to see. I cannot wait to see what will be the peak of the season, what's going to happen in the next episode, and how they will follow up on all the setup that we've been getting and everything that's been happening so far. So yeah, struggle, but hopefully some of it will be resolved. So yeah, that's my so far.
Crisis, struggle. Harry, how about you? And people in the chat, give us your one words as well. I'm curious to see what everyone thought. But Harry, how about you?
My one word is, I think, I'd say journey. I feel like we are still on the sense of that. We're trying to still get to this destination. And I think we are going to finally see that in the next episode. But this episode was lots of walking, talking, the characters preparing for what's going to happen in the final episode. It was a bit... I was fine with understanding it's building up to the finale. There was a lot of, as I said before, people in the woods. You got the Theo and Galadriel one, then there's a few. So that's what I'd say. Lots of getting towards final destination with the Harfoots as well. Like with Me Too Man, they made it to the Grove. Lots of traveling and stuff. So that's how I would say yeah for that episode.
Nice. And I'm also seeing in the chat, pointless, very bored, exasperation. All right, some negative thoughts. That's okay. You're allowed to have those. But also self-inflicted. We see some self-inflicted wounds in this episode. Woe. Every character ends up in woe. So that's I like those. Chen, how about you?
I would call it same kind of sentiment. I would call it build-up. Not build-up in the sense of the first 5 episodes, but just in the sense of I have a friend, someone I know who would call this sort of thing a cinematic comma. But but no, I don't mean that in a derogatory way. It's like, it's fine. It's building up to the finale, basically. That's what this episode really is. And that's, a choice that you see in a lot of shows and stuff. It was very much like, if you try and chart what happened in the episode, it isn't much like actual incident. There isn't a lot of it.
I agree. Yeah.
It's really just building up to the finale, which is not a concept that I have an issue with. It's fine. I thought it in terms of pacing, it clipped along nicely, sort of got into a groove and went with it. I was fine with that. So yeah.
Well, I find myself probably at odds with everybody in the chat and probably everybody on this panel, because I thought a lot happened in this episode in terms of the characters' relationships. Not a lot happened in terms of events. I mean, you're 100% right there. But the relationships between the characters, which when I watch a show, that's the show for me for the most part.
Yes.
Like action and stuff, that's all kind of ancillary to what's the emotional core for me. So, but James, how about you?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I think even though the drama of the episode probably didn't reach the heights that episode 6 did, there was still a lot of shocking revelation here. And so if I had to pick one word, I might actually say shocking, but I did also want to, if I can use a phrase, I did want to say missing is not dead, because I think there's a couple of there's a couple of ways in which that's relevant to episode 7 that I'm sure we're going to get into.
Yeah, we will definitely get into those. Those are on my list. So one thing, we usually don't talk about the title in this stream because, well, the show does a good job of creating a title for each episode that is very, very on the nose, and it's very clear why they named it what they named it. You know, the episode The Wave starts out with a big wave. Like there's no mystery about what it means. And when I saw the title card reveal, the Eye, I thought, okay, my mind immediately went to the Eye of Sauron. I thought, okay, there's going to be a big reveal about Sauron's identity, or whether or not we know who Sauron is. There's going to be activities related to Sauron. Some big reveal related to Sauron is going to occur. That didn't really happen. And
well, I
go ahead.
I was just going to say, in every episode, they've used a title that makes us think we know exactly what it's going to be about. And I don't think it generally is. So, for example, the episode Adar, right, didn't feature Adar much at all, but it has had a lot of fatherly relationships. That was the episode where we really got some wonderful scenes about fathers. And so I think they're doing that a lot. And in this case, right, we all immediately jump to this idea, the Eye. It's clearly talking about Sauron. Maybe this is the episode where we're going to get the Sauron reveal. No, but it's still, we get that opening scene with Galadriel's eye. And of course, we get what happens to Miriel. So I think they're playing with this with us a lot in that regard. They're giving us names that we immediately think, oh, it's clearly going to be about A. And they're like, no, it's actually going to be about B. There's still going to be some essence of the episode that's about that title, but not necessarily what we initially expect.
Well, and what is the connection to the Eye in this episode? It's a little more obtuse to me.
Yeah, well, I think Miriel's blindness is the main thing that's a reference to. And you know, there's the visual tie-in with Galadriel waking up, and that whole amazing scene at the start, just dealing with the result of the volcano explosion. But I think that's a reference mostly to Miriel. Perhaps also, I don't know if we want to get into it yet, but this shift in Galadriel seeing things that she may not have seen before. This is a really interesting episode for Galadriel's arc.
Yeah, there's two kind of more obvious symbols of the Eye. The cultists seem to have the symbol of the Eye on one of those artifacts, and somebody pointed out, I actually haven't managed to see it for the second time, so I cannot confirm for sure. But the hole in the wall that Durin, bumps through, it kind of felt like it. I mean, you can kind of maybe look at it as an eye looking into the darkness of Khazad-dûm, but I don't know how. Does it really read like that? Because I read that after the episode, I haven't seen it again. But I just had those two. But they did mention the one kind of a disappointment for me was that they did mention that the evil would be revealed. It kind
that's
of
on the
was
marketing,
like we saw, the Balrog. I guess Mordor was revealed in some way. We saw the three ladies from the east for the first time interact with people. So in that sense, they were revealed. But as James said, we were thinking, okay, now is the time. Now we're going to see Sauron, or now we're going to see at least something here that points towards Sauron. But no, we saw something else.
Just one of many times that the show is kind of misdirecting us, right? They're really doing that as often as they can, which is fun to some people. Some people don't love it so much. Actually, we have a question here in the chat. It's a little bit of a left turn, but James, you talked a bit about this in the last episode of Rings Wrap Up. So it says, can you guys break down what the intro cinematic means? Because I can't make any point of it besides the two trees, but the shifting color dirt, what's that about? So I know you have a good explanation about that. So if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I think the whole opening sequence is an allusion to the Ainulindale, the music of the Ainur, and this whole sense that the world Arda was created through music, through sound, through vibration. I think that's sort of the overall idea of that opening sequence. And so I think they're depicting various elements of the universe through the grains of sand. And I think what they're doing with that, when the sort of darker colored sand snakes its way through, that's I think both a reference to the discord of Melkor in the original Ainulindale, but also just sort of Sauron. It's evil coming into the world and changing the plans, I think is what's going on specifically with that darker colored sand that snakes its way in.
Yeah, I've come to really appreciate the intro, that little clip. I mean, it's a little bit, there's not a lot of vibrant colors. It didn't strike me as being very impressive the first time I watched it, but I appreciate this symbology that's going on there. So intellectually, as a Tolkien fan, I really like it. Even if to the average person, maybe it doesn't seem that radical or enjoyable or interesting. I think it is. There's a hidden layer there.
Actually, if I can just for a second. So there was actually a tweet a few weeks ago. Some person on Twitter, it's been a while, so I cannot recall who it was. But they said that this is actually some kind of like an actual real life technique that you put these grains of sand on like some surface, and then with music you can actually move it and do things with it.
Yes, I was just
crazy, and this is one of the best. So this show has a lot of, disappointing things that they did, but some of the things they did are absolutely amazing. And for me, the intro and the whole approach to the intro and everything. I mean, James just said it. Like it's the direct analogy to how the world was created. It's perfect.
I was actually just earlier today, completely by coincidence, talking about it with Monovorantis, who is doing an analysis on the music of the title of the intro, and we dug up how they did it, and it's done by causing the surface to vibrate with opera music, Gregorian chants, and musical instruments like ocarina, steel triangle, and guitars. So that's what's causing the vibrations that are making the effect. I'm more taken with the music personally than the visuals, but yeah.
Was there anything on how they caused the grains of sand to form certain images?
By means of I'm sure some of it was.
Is there like magnetism?
I'm sure some of it was digitally,
it's a combination of the actual effect of sending vibrations through a metal plate with grains of sand on it and computer graphics.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, while we're still getting sort of warmed up here before we get into the episode proper, one thing that I've enjoyed asking everyone this week is what their favorite and least favorite lines from the episode is. And I've been calling this pros and no-nos. And so obviously the beauty of Tolkien's writing, and I think something that we all love about his writing, is it's not just the massive scope of the world or the depth of the history or the themes, although all those things are aspects of his writing that I love, but it's also his actual writing, the prose, sometimes poetry that he uses to explore all of that. And the Rings of Power show, I think for me, that's one of the things that I've been watching most ardently, is to get immersed in the language. And the show's been a little bit uneven, but sometimes it's very, very good. There are moments that are fantastic, and there are moments that are not so fantastic, that strike me as a little bit anachronistic. And so I like to ask everybody in each episode, was there any line or lines that just jumped out at you as just very Tolkienian that really felt right to you? And of course, if there's anything that felt really wrong to you, let's hear that as well. So why don't we start with Han on this one?
Starting with the drunk person first. That's a good call. No, I mean, there's a lot of lines. Like, I'm struggling to think of a specific one. Like, there's a lot of, not so much lines that sound un-Tolkienian so much as lines that are trying too hard to be Tolkienian, I guess. A lot of the Elven dialogue is like that, where it would be very old-timey. And also, I was just reading this earlier today, found it absolutely hilarious. This tendency, which is also apparent in this episode, to have the dialogue in scenes revolve around telling stories. So in this episode, Galadriel would be, "Oh, when I was your age, there was no such thing as orcs." Never mind that that's not consistent with something that was said in previous episode, where she was told stories as a girl about orcs and orcs. But beyond that, it's just someone made the example in response to the Guardian. "Oh, Galadriel, what would you like for dinner?" And then like she supposedly answered, "It was in the first, age that it was told that, those sorts of things are like, not my favorite kind of thing in general, just conceptually. Just telling stories and name dropping things that irks me a little.
Like the way that they set up, Theo asking Bronwyn, "What was the thing that you used to tell me when I was upset?" Is like they had to package that into a story to bring that line in.
Yes, that's a very good example. But also examples in this episode, I'm sure we'll get to one. James has mentioned it already. That's just one example, but there are many. As for something that is Tolkienian, well, there are lines that are straight out of Tolkien's prose. I mean, they have it to their disposal. They may as well use it. So Galadriel describes her and Kelleborn's meeting with a description that is directly from the meeting of Luthien and Beren. But there's a lot of stuff like that. So yeah, that's sort of like when they're actually perhaps the most Tolkienian would actually be a kind of pastiche of Tolkien would be the poem, The Wandering Day. That was very nice poetry, and very Tolkien-like. So yeah.
Nice. Harry, how about you? What's your favorite line?
As to favorite lines, I would say is I don't know exactly word for word what the line was. It was a lot of I think about that whole period of when Galadriel was talking to Theo under the branch and speaking to him about, it's not your fault and going on about that and how it's her own. Then spoke about how darkness works, and then it kind of links back to that Finrod thing that she told her. So that whole area, as for lines, again, I don't know the exact lines that was said, but that whole light turn on, I'm sorry, that whole area, that whole bit of lines were good.
Yeah, and well, that was one of my favorite lines. I'll go ahead and read it because I have it prepared here, and I bet it's part of what you enjoyed. When Theo asks her, "How many orcs have you killed?" and she says, "Many," and he says, "Good." And she says, "I would not use such words." And he says, "Why not?" "It darkens the heart to call dark deeds good. It gives place for evil to thrive inside us. Every war is fought both without and within. Of that, every soldier must be mindful. Even I, even you." That whole exchange I thought was
that one.
great.
That's the one. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And not just because it feels Tolkienian to me. It's also, she's talking to him, but she's also talking to herself, as she was basically in that entire scene.
That to me was the first real mark of the character arc shift that we're seeing in Galadriel, because that's not the Galadriel we saw in episode 6. If you compare that conversation with Theo to the conversation she had with Adar, she's already changing, right? Her response to the volcano has been a big shift already in her attitude towards how we deal with the orcs and darkness and so on. Yeah, so it was a remarkable conversation with Theo for more than one reason, but that reason certainly.
And James, would that conversation kind of be up there for you for favorite lines, or did you have anything else?
And yeah, I mean, certainly that conversation. I mean, also any time that Durin and Elrond are speaking to one another. But when Galadriel, I mean, the other, of course, aspect with Galadriel talking to Theo, we did get the retelling of the Beren and Luthien meet cute, which I was disappointed in because I felt the reuse of that was cheapened it. I get that. Yeah, it was sort of disappointing that they felt the need to reuse that in that context. Absolutely thrilled that Kelleborn's been mentioned. So in Kelleborn was probably my favorite word in the whole episode, because just to hear his name mentioned was a wonderful delight. Completely answering all the critics who said they're getting the lore totally wrong. She should be married to Kelleborn by now. Well, guess what? She is. But also, I mean, the other moment that I loved coming back to Elrond and Durin was something that wasn't said, which was Durin's real name. The fact that he was just about to tell Elrond his real name, and Elrond said, "Don't do it." That was a wonderful
Even
moment
though
for me.
his real name is supposed to also be Durin. Durin is Kuzdul.
Well, that doesn't necessarily. The fact that Durin is Kuzdul doesn't necessarily mean that it's his secret name. But yeah.
Yeah, they said it in an interview what it should have been or something, or alluded to or were about to, and then stopped halfway. But
yeah, apparently it's supposed to be a Khaled Tag, which should mean glass beard, probably, apparently.
Yep.
So that's an interesting choice.
So it's been revealed what Prince Durin's real name is?
How did they know?
Kind of like it was there was like an interview with the showrunners, and apparently they stopped halfway through, but somebody did, like, I guess the interviewer did catch it's Khaled Tug or Tug, I guess, Eug, and it's supposed to mean glass beard.
Yeah, I'm not. A lot of things have been cut. I don't know why they've cut so much.
You have to cut. I mean, you always cut when you
like that scene between Pharazôn and Galadriel, that dinner time, that also builds the relationship of Kemen and Earya, and that got cut. There's been a few more stuff that we know. It's just interesting to see what they do to the chopping block and how, if that would have worked out. They did even say in an interview that some of the smaller scenes did not work as well. So it's like compensating for that. So I hope in season 2 they do. Maybe some scenes are cut scenes, some scenes never work. That's what film works.
Yeah, you always have to cut, always, no matter how well you play.
And unfortunately,
that would be a nice thing.
Yeah, often it means though that later scenes that build on the cut scenes no longer have the impact that they should have had. And a good example of that, Harry, you mentioned the dinner scene between Eärien and Kemen being one of the things that was cut out. And I think that weakened the later scene with Kemen basically being willing to sabotage the boat.
I actually, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I think that would have been a stronger, it would have seemed a stronger motivation to us had we seen more scenes between Eärien and Kemen.
And that scene would have also gone into more about Pharazôn, because I think in that episode when we see him pick up the bucket and when Eärien spills it over and says, "Okay, for dinner, okay, you have to pay for dinner," then that next scene would have been that dinner scene, and also that in that same scene, Pharazôn and Galadriel, they get into a fight, not fight, but shouting argument, find the whole Numenorean court while they're having dinner. So it would have built on that as well. So, but again, I understand. Maybe knowing the name, there's a decision they made last minute. But yeah, there's a noticeable thing about this, at least, because Ramsey Avery even said this show was meant to be 10 episodes originally.
Yeah, I think that was in the scripting phase, though. And it got shrunk in the scripting phase. But
they have to cut stuff off.
Yeah, you always have to cut stuff off. The thing here is that you feel that things are missing. Most of the time, every movie and every show has things cut off. But normally you don't feel that things are missing. Whereas here you do sometimes a little bit.
You cut things that are inessential, at least that's the idea, not things that feel like they should be an essential stepping stone in a plot, right? So where you take it out,
when you script things, you always in your mind think that they're essential. Then looking at it in the edit, no, it's just the nature of things. Looking at it at the edit, you always find something to cut, always.
Well, Strider, did you have a favorite line?
Yeah. So as usual, I'm a huge fan of Stranger and everything he's doing. So him whispering to the tree was really nice. I really felt that, and I absolutely love what Mr. Wayman is doing with the character. But if I had to choose like a line or two, it would be that Durin and Elrond saying goodbye. Durin asking him to stay for the dinner, and then Elrond is saying that he has to go, and then Durin says goodbye, but then Elrond says, "No, we say Namari," and then he explains the meaning. I think that was they're consistently always great, and during to stole the show in this specific scene. So yeah, I think that was for me very moving. I absolutely loved it. And
Yeah,
for the
that
things I
com-
did, yeah, just a quick one. For the things that I didn't like, I wasn't sure about Elendil. I understand the motivation, all that, but I wasn't sure about Elendil's. I shouldn't have taken the elf out from the sea or whatever he said. I wasn't really convinced by that, but this good part was absolutely amazing.
Hen, what did you have to say about that?
Yeah, I understand, Elendil being like really, really grief-stricken and being like, oh, I shouldn't have brought the elf on board. I get that. To me, that's very
But
understandable.
the sea is always right.
Well, let's go ahead and pick up with the start of the actual episode. And I've already seen several people in the chat asking us to address how in the world all of our main characters and all the side characters, and how do people survive the pyroclastic flow, the eruption of Mount Doom. And I'm just gonna say that they can't, and that we just gotta deal with it and kind of get over it to enjoy the episode.
Yeah, that happens.
You just gotta deal with it. That's my own
answer. Yeah. That sort of thing happens in action kind of movies
And
all the time.
Think of it like in the Lord of the Rings. How did when in the movies when it's called Frodo, Gimli, and Aragorn, they come and with the army of the dead, how are there 3 ships sailing itself, with no army? It's like there's technical things. In that, even that's more of a technicality. I kind of understand why some people don't even want us to say the line pyroclastic flow anymore. So I think that's just it's like the word chill has just gone,
Harry, you just ruined a part of the movie for me. I never thought of that. How were they controlling the ships when there's like 3 actual beings there? Thank you so much for this.
The mechanics of the plot are so secondary to what it facilitates in terms of it's like you can find that in every story.
You say that, but then we're gonna get angry in a second about Halbrand riding across, Harfoot.
Yeah, that's different.
Unless he's not mortal, but we'll come to it.
Yeah, exactly.
True.
But one of the things that I, of course, enjoy, I don't want to totally write off people's concerns about the unbelievability of them surviving the volcano erupting, because one of the things I love about Tolkien is how much effort and time he put into making everything believable, the detail, and make it feel real. Of course, it doesn't. He has said in his letters, this and that don't exactly align with the mechanics of the real world. I think I don't remember the number of the letter, but there's a letter where he's responding to someone. He's like, you're taking this a little too literally, too seriously. You need to chill out. Like, in my world, the mechanics work based on the rules of my world. It doesn't have to match the real world. And so I think we kind of just have to try and embrace that. I know it's hard because if you have to do that too many times, it's too much work for the viewer. You want to be immersed, and it takes you out of it when things are so gobsmackingly, obviously unrealistic that it takes you out of it. But for this, I just think we don't see it. First of all, the last episode ends and then they wake up, so we can just kind of roll with where they pick up. And I think if you do that, this first scene is really, really powerful. It's it's a post-apocalyptic scene in terms of the monochromatic coloring, the dust everywhere, the people sort of wandering around aimlessly. I thought it was a really powerful scene. So I really want to hear how you guys felt this scene worked in terms of the chaos and the way it was shot. James, let's start with you.
Yeah, I mean, just the disorienting effect, the way that it kind of started off, we couldn't hear anything, we felt disoriented, and then piece by piece, we saw more. We saw one person or a burning horse, or another person emerge, and so on. As Galadriel was almost realizing the extent of what had happened, more and more pieces come together. And I think that's my understanding is that's often what happens in these kind of traumatic situations, that initially you kind of have this tunnel vision, and then gradually things start to come into focus again and you realize what's going on. So I thought they portrayed that wonderfully. I loved just how monochromatic this is, given how the breadth of colors we've seen before in the palette. The cinematography has been really, I think, amazing in that regard, just how broad the color range has been. And so now to have this scene that's so monochromatic, it really brings us into just the almost claustrophobic kind of feeling that it must have been like with the ash and the cloud and everything. I thought it was really well done. The camera angles, it was this wonderful very well done disorienting effect, which I thought worked really well.
And in this scene, we see we get just it's very brief, but we see Muriel jumping into the fray, saving somebody. We see a close character, Untamo, die. We see Isildur, is confronted with the death of his friend. He saves his other friend. It's a very brief scene, but I think a lot is happening. It kicks the episode off on a very chaotic note and sets a lot of characters kind of on a path, and tells you kind of what's going on with them. And then it cuts away and we cut to Galadriel and Theo. So I thought that was very effective.
Yeah. I thought it was nice seeing, it sets up Muriel as being somebody that's willing to risk her own life. She's hands-on. She wasn't sort of standing back. She was willing to go into, buildings and stuff to save people. I thought that was a nice little character, sort of character building to see there.
Now, this is something that just kind of came to me, and it bothered me a little bit at the time. Not bothered me as in like it's inconsistent with lore or anything, but in American films, at least, there's this huge value behind the idea of like you don't leave the fallen dead behind, right? If someone dies, you carry them out of battle. So we have all these heroic moments in war movies where people are like, carrying their brethren out, even if they're dead, you're carrying them out. And that is not what happens in this scene. Once it's revealed that Untamo dies, Isildur tries to go back and Muriel says, leave him, he's dead. And which is obviously very pragmatic, don't risk your own life to save a corpse. But also there's a value judgment there that is inconsistent with my very modern tastes. But I wonder if there's anything, and I have no answer on this, and I'm curious, James or anybody else on the panel, if you have thoughts about it, how that might jive with Numenorean values or beliefs about death.
They do it in the Two Towers. Theo then says after the warg attack, leave the dead. It's done in a kind of outrage kind of thing, but still it's very much there. So
Yeah, it's an interesting cultural distinction generally in the primary world about the sort of importance of burying the dead and so on, and giving people a proper burial and so on. I think it can vary culturally. I don't know if they were going for something specific with the Numenoreans, and it's unclear, of course, where we are at in the Numenorean obsession with death. Of course, in the books, the Numenoreans go through this stage where they become increasingly obsessed with the dead and with building tombs and so on. So, it's possible that this was a deliberate attempt to convey that they're not there yet, that they're not, they don't have that obsession yet as well. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see if that's ever built on. I hadn't noticed that at the time, but it could be something that they do develop, this changing attitude towards death amongst the Numenoreans.
Right. Well, we go. Let's stick with the Southlanders and the Galadriel plot line, and I kind of we already touched on it a little bit, but the scenes with Galadriel and Theo, I think for everybody it felt like it marked a turning point for Galadriel. At the end of the last episode, also the way that she sort of almost was resigned to her fate. She saw the oncoming volcanic flow, and it looked like she was just ready to go. She's like, I'm going to die. And she closed her eyes in resignation. But then she wakes up and sees the chaos. And now she's dealing with it. And we get kind of a very different Galadriel. And in part because she has to take this young person under her wing and protect him. And so in the course of their conversations, she's giving him all the wisdom that we had been wanting to hear from Galadriel through 6 episodes. Where is the Galadriel we've seen in the Third Age? Where is this wise elf? Because all we've gotten is kind of a rage machine. And I'm not against this approach to the character. I think it's very interesting, but it has felt kind of a little bit one note to some people. Where's the kernel, that seed of wisdom that will blossom into Third Age Galadriel? We haven't seen it, but here we do. And lots of great lines between her and Theo. And again, I'll just say it feels like she's talking to Theo, but she's also reminding herself of all these things and sort of counseling herself to accept the will of the Valar. There's a great line about there are powers other than evil in this world, and we just have to trust to their designs and abandon our own in times like this. And we also get some great moments that touch on hope and despair, where Theo is really hopeless. his world has been destroyed, his home is gone, and he kind of spits back at her like, where's the design in my home being destroyed? And she says, I don't know. So he's kind of despairing, and she's telling him, you need to, they don't use the phrase, but this is Estelle hope. This is, we don't know where I don't have a reason for you to hope other than you just need to. And so I liked that was all baked into this otherwise very natural dialogue between these two characters. So just open forum. James, what did you think of these scenes?
Yeah, I mean, as we've already touched on, this really, I think, marks the start of the shift towards the wiser Galadriel that we know from the Third Age. It's interesting that this was sort of the event that kicked it off. Although it's interesting, it could partly have been her conversation with Adar, reflection on her conversation with Adar, that also made her think about some of these things. But certainly this realization that, in some senses, she was responsible for things that happened and the destruction that just happened, that she's really starting to reassess a lot of things. Of course, we also in this conversation get the revelation that she's married.
Let's save that. Let's save that.
We'll save that. Yeah, but certainly in terms of, there's a lot to say there. Yeah. So yeah, but in terms of the character arc, I mean, I know some people in the channel are suggesting even the changes happen too quick. I think there's still a lot more for Galadriel to go through to develop the wisdom that she has in the Third Age. But I think this is an interesting starting point. I think we're definitely seeing the beginning of her, especially just the extent to which she said stuff to Theo that she probably needed to be told to herself in the previous episode. And as you say, she wasn't just speaking to Theo in many regards. She was really talking to herself.
Yeah, and a great question by R.S. Aurelian in the chat. What is Galadriel transforming into? And the answer is Sauron. The answer to every question is Sauron.
No, come on, people. I mean, it's obvious what the answer is. It's clear that Beric is Sauron. Come on.
True.
Strider, how about you on this one?
Well, I really liked the moment where she gives her sword to Theo, and it kind of goes back to what Elrond told her in the first episode or the second. I think the first episode. I think that was a really cool moment of her giving the sword, and it's also in this whole scene and like this whole, or was it like a couple of scenes? But what you just talked about, her conversation, the wisdom she's finally showing and giving to Theo. I really liked the pairing because it brings out things in both of them that they are usually far away from. Like, she's thousands of years old, and here's this kid who is like 13, 14 years old. And
14.
He is showing signs of perhaps going on the dark path. And she recognizes that due to everything she's seen, but most importantly, due to the road that she has taken, and also based on her conversation with Adar, which was fantastic. That line about perhaps you should have looked for Morgoth's successor, and perhaps that search should have ended in a mirror. That was absolutely amazing. And for her to give this sword to Theo, and there's also there's symbolism for both of them. She's putting away the sword. That's important for her, but she's also giving this sword, which is like the light side sword, to Theo, who was the whole season being connected with this evil sword, getting addicted to it, doing like the blood sacrifice activation, whatever. So he was connected with this dark, and now he is leaning towards the light. And she's pulling them towards the light and also pulling herself. So I'm actually very happy. This is finally, as you guys said, like, this is finally the Galadriel we wanted to see and that we need to see. And also, this is just probably just the start of her character arc. And there's a really nice still from the next episode where she's, like, I think hugging Elrond. I cannot remember specifically, but it was a really nice scene. You can see, I think she seems to be very emotional there, and she didn't show a lot of emotions besides anger and passion and something like that. Not a lot of other emotions. So I think we're gonna see other sides of her more concretely, more forefront from now on. So I overall very much like this. Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting that the way, or one of the ways that she inspires Theo and what sets him on this new path is she gives him a sword. She says, "You're now a soldier." I thought that was interesting. I'm not sure what to make of it. It actually felt a little bit odd to me, but he is certainly, we see over the course of the episode, he embraces that I am now a soldier. And I think we're going to see him kind of, it's kind of his coming of age moment. I think him receiving this sword and I am now a soldier. I'm a protector. Exactly what that becomes, I don't know, but I think this is a bit of quietly a turning point for Theo. Harry, what did you think about it?
I think it's quite telling. I think you mentioned it, coming of age, whereby it'd be interesting to see what that exchange is. So particular that is Theo and Galadriel. Look at that. Is those two together, because I feel like maybe will this result in him being good, or will he go down the evil path? And I think that in like 2-3 seasons time, when you look back at this scene, it's almost like as a moment, like what actually happened here, and could Galadriel have made him better? Because he did say some really nice things, but even still, when the orcs came, he got out his sword and was still ready to go come. So he still has that urge in him, that internal drive. And I think despite him probably calming him down for a bit, it still shows that there is still something in him. So, and that is what I really liked about that. And also for the people in chat asking what I was eating, I'm having morams. Stop. You'll have to find out until the next episode to find out what I was eating.
Yeah, what are those?
Morams, nice sweets. For the neck, I need them.
Oh, good.
So they sound like a heavy smoker. That's my... Yeah.
There has been a lot of speculation that Theo may become a Nazgul. So if he does, right, we'll look back on all these scenes and they'll have a kind of a different meaning to them. Chen, how about you?
About Theo, I used to think that there's no way that Theo would be a Nazgul, because I didn't think, in a sense I still don't, that they would want to, like, Theo's going to age presumably naturally across the season. So he's 14 in this, he'll be, I don't know, 17 in the next one. So it's
he grows quite quickly. I know your point.
Yeah, but you know what I mean? He's not going to turn 35 all
I remember, but within seasons, Lost Kingdom did it, whereby they're able to... Stride, you can back me up on this, come on. The king, I think, forgot his name, but within a few seasons, he has a beard and everything. And
but he's not
Edward, I think.
Edward, he's not even going to be 26, you know what I mean?
Okay, but when's the next season? In 2 years. There's 2 years forward thinking, and the filming's beginning now, and he's already, the cast, Nazni Bunyadi said at the beginning he was shorter than her. Now he's much taller, so I think there is a possibility. We shouldn't be ruling it out, is what I'd say.
Yes, I agree. We shouldn't be ruling it out. I just because of what I saw in this episode, we shouldn't be ruling it out. But yeah, it's weird, peculiar. We'll see.
So let's get to the little lore nugget. Not as many lore nuggets in this episode as in prior episodes, but the one that has everyone's tongues wagging and heads buzzing is the name drop of Kelleborn. James, as you already mentioned, people have been this has been a sore point for a lot of Tolkien fans. How could Galadriel be unmarried? Where is Kelleborn? And that was sort of the number one. That was exhibit A for the argument that Amazon doesn't know what they're doing. It turns out that they do have a plan for Kelleborn. She was in fact married to him in the First Age, and the explanation is that he went off to war in the First Age, which she counseled against, and she never saw him again. And so she doesn't say he's dead or that I saw him die, just that I never saw him again, which I think clearly she believes that he's dead. That was certainly just the way it was delivered. It seems like emotionally she believes he's gone, but we have no confirmation as viewers. And I think as Tolkien readers, we can be pretty certain that he's not dead, right? There's just no way. At a very meta level, I think it was reported that was one of Christopher Tolkien's like one conditions is you don't change who's dead when or who's alive when, really, in the timeline. So they're not killing off Kelleborn. So I think he's alive. We'll probably have a reunification plot line in the future, and I don't know how that'll play out. But this was it was also kind of blink and you miss it. It was very, very quick. Not a lot of time spent dwelling on it. So this is just laying the seeds for something that's going to happen later on. But what were all of your thoughts about name dropping Kelleborn here, James?
Well, I mean, one of the things I liked about it was one of the few times we see Galadriel smile as well. She actually has, she's had such an intensity on her face, and she actually, that breaks down a little bit as she's saying and giving the story of how they met, which, as I said before, I didn't really like the fact they just reused the Beren and Luthien story because I felt that it cheapened it. But yeah, I mean, I think there's an important lesson here, which, and we saw this actually really early on. Remember when one of the fellow elven soldiers tells Arondir that there's only been 2 unions of elf and human before, and that was a nice response to the people that said the showrunners don't know what they're doing because this is a rare thing. No, the showrunners are quite aware of this bit of lore. And the same thing here. And so I think there's an important lesson that we shouldn't assume that because we haven't seen someone, or something hasn't been addressed yet, that doesn't mean that they haven't got a plan for it. This was a good example of that. But it's interesting, a lot of another thing that people have mentioned is, why are we only finding out about this now? There's been such an obsession she's had about Finrod and revenge. But I to me, that seems, depending on her level of sort of trauma around both of those incidents, I don't necessarily have a problem with that. She's not necessarily, it could be that in some senses she's taken on the revenge track with Finrod because she can't come to terms with the possibility that Kelleborn is dead. This may be her way of dealing with the uncertainty of what's happened to Kelleborn as well. We'll see. I mean, maybe they'll deal with this. Maybe they'll explore more in future episodes. Exactly, whether she went after him at any point, what her sort of current feelings are about him. I think it'll be interesting to see. I don't think we can really say too much at this point until they finally meet again.
And on this point, Morvith Clark, in an interview with, I think it was TV Line, was asked about this very issue, and she said that she loves that he wasn't mentioned until this point in the series because, she said, quote, Kelleborn being gone is just something that's almost completely compartmentalized. It's like she can't deal with that. Yeah. And I do like that idea. And, normally with characters, if we're not given their backstory up front, it is revealed over time, and that's part of what is interesting for the viewer. The reveals of their backstory kind of is part of their arc. This is a little interesting because we were given a backstory up front that was sort of sets the stage. It's kind of a prologue, and Kelleborn wasn't mentioned. But I don't think that we should take the fact that there was a prologue, a backstory given up front, to mean that there's nothing else that can be discovered about her past. Right. So I think Kelleborn's part of that. So, Hen, how about you? What are your thoughts?
One thing, I think that the assumption, the show, it's a tricky thing, the thing James mentioned, which is to say, the showrunners, we should assume that they know better. I think that's a tricky.
Well, we shouldn't assume that just
walk.
Yeah,
we shouldn't assume they're incompetent or anything, but at the same time, to look at some of these writing things and assume, the showrunners are better than that, it will surely get explained in a later episode. I think the immediate answer to that would be the Mithril thing, which we'll get to later, which people built very elaborate theories about how it's actually a misdirect. And
yes, fair enough.
I mean,
it still could be.
I'm still embracing.
It could be.
I compartmentalize that.
All the evidence in this episode point to it
Agreed.
not being. Agreed. But that's just one thing. As for the Kelleborn thing, to me, a little bit. It's a little weird. My husband is MIA for I don't know, a millennia. She assumes he's dead. It was pretty hokey. May as well. We had assumed that perhaps it's more likely that she would only meet Kelleborn later on. But this, a little bit convoluted for my taste as a piece of backstory, especially, to speak to your point, as a piece of backstory introduced like a third or way into the 7th of 8 episodes. So that's a tricky line to walk. To me, it was a bit weird as a piece of backstory.
Strider, how about you? And also, do you have any theories about where he's been all this time?
Yeah, so first of all, I'm happy we definitely got the mention of Kelleborn. That's great news. She had a really good comment So Caleb means silver, and she said that she called him the silver clamp because the armor didn't fit. And that was a really nice piece of trivia about their relationship. I really love that moment. I read a theory on Reddit, and somebody went into way more details than I'm going to now. But when basically they were talking about when someone deals with trauma, how some people deal with that is that, and as Morphin said, and somebody mentioned in the interview, they compartmentalize that and just like leave it in like one room in their brain and just never go back there. So like you can compare Kelleborn with Finrod. For Finrod, she, for one reason or another, she knows that Sauron is the cause of his downfall, and she has the target for vengeance, and she can focus on that. While on the other hand, Kelleborn is missing. She doesn't have anyone to blame, but we know that whether they can incorporate that officially or not in the show, but elves made for life, one or two exceptions aside. So this must be awful. Like they once they connect with the person, they connect, and to lose that person must be absolutely horrifying. And it kind of makes sense. Like I could see this, over 2,000 years or 2-3, depending on the timeline, suffering without the person you love because you know what happened to them. And then I'll get to the second question. But you have this quest at least to avenge your brother, and you can focus out and so on. So I think her character arc is starting to make more sense, even though she was super antipathic super anti-sympathetic in the first 5-6 episodes. 6 episodes. I'm very happy with what we got in this episode. And to answer the question, I guess so I have two options. The first one is that he is somehow somewhere captured, which is going to be very interesting if Kelleborn was indeed captured somewhere in some dungeon for like the last, let's say, 2,000-3,000 years. I mean, what does that do to an elf? That's absolutely crazy. We don't have a precedent for that.
What happens if Kelleborn
at least? Yeah, but I think she would have noticed that so far by now. But the other theory that got me very, very worried, Matt from the Nerd of the Rings proposed that, and I seriously, please do not let this happen. What if Kelleborn takes place of Glorfindel? He died, but he died doing something very noble, perhaps being the elf from that Mithril myth. And then he's coming back to Middle-earth instead of Glorfindel, who was, as we know, reincarnated due to his outstanding life and feats in life and being heroic, and is sent back to Middle-earth as basically a member of kind of the Istari, the extended edition. So maybe Kelleborn will take his place, which is a theory I do not like, especially because Glorfindel was cut out from the Bakshi cartoon where he was replaced by Legolas. And of course, as we know in the movies, he was replaced by Arwen. And while I do not mind those two characters doing those things, I want Glorfindel. So I'm hoping that's not the case. Hopefully, we'll see Glorfindel. And as for Kelleborn, I think the most logical thing to assume, unless it's somehow this Glorfindel theory, he's probably captured somewhere. Like, I don't see what else could be, because Galadriel spent, you can if I was Kelleborn and I was able to move around Middle-earth, I would go to Lindon or Eregion. Like, you would know that there's the remnants of the Noldor and everyone in Lindon, and you can go and find her. So the fact that he didn't do that, something very bad happened, and the best guess is that he is somehow somewhere captured, like imprisoned. Yeah, that's my thoughts so far.
I hope it's not like I hope it's not like a card that Sauron, when he does confront Galadriel, has on her like, "Oh, Galadriel, don't you want to meet Kelleborn again?" I hope it's not that, but I really think it's just a conceit for it was convenient for them to not have him there. Therefore, at the time, therefore he is not there. I think that's what it is. Really, that's all it comes down to.
Maybe we have an amnesia plotline in our future. He got bonked on the head and he's been wandering around not knowing who he is.
Isn't that Meteor Man?
That's
yeah, that's Meteor Man. It's also Nienor. But yeah.
Well, Harry, I want to flip it to you and add one little layer to this. So the show has not confirmed, the way Elvish reincarnation works, or reincarnation is not exactly the right word, but serial longevity. So, do their spirits go back to the halls of Mandos and get rehoused at some point? The show has not confirmed that exists in the Rings of Power universe. But of course, if it does, as it does in the text, that adds another layer to her decision not to go to Valinor, because ostensibly she would know that Kelleborn, if he is dead, as she believes, may be there in the halls of Mandos, or maybe he's already been rehoused, and she would have an opportunity to see him again, making that choice that much more significant. And Strider brought up this topic when he suggested the Nerd of the Rings theory that, well, maybe Kelleborn gets reincarnated and sent back to Middle Earth, taking the place of Glorfindel. So we're kind of in the Elvish reincarnation zone. So what did you think of Kelleborn in general, and do you think that the Elvish reincarnation is going to be brought up at some point in the future?
Well, first off, my theory is that Kelleborn is at the Elf Lords only meeting, which is probably, I think, really start of episode when I really do think, I know not a lot of people talk about it, but I think that is quite an important thing that we will get called back onto, maybe even season 2, where once we have Círdan, they will maybe show a flashback or something, or mention that scene, because I think it's a really vital thing that Elrond was not allowed to be permitted to that meeting. And I think even, and of course, Galadriel isn't there. And of course it doesn't work out with, okay, Kelleborn is still alive and now he's a lord. How do you not know about Galadriel? That's the only little stumbling block, unless this is his return somehow. But I do, and they weren't able to meet in time because Galadriel got sent west. But I do think that in episode 1, when we heard about an Elf Lords meeting with Elf Lords only, I think in season 2, or at some point we'll get at least either a reference to that meeting or what was decided there. Because originally I was thinking maybe in season 2 we find out that Anatar was at that meeting potentially if he was already in a regular, which I don't think is the case anymore, unfortunately. And also maybe have Círdan there, which is he was canonically in season 1, but he was at that meeting, and we meet him in season 2, and maybe that also works for Kelleborn as well. Where's it going? So I think that is how I potentially, even if that is not the case and Kelleborn isn't there, I do think that area from that first episode, that little point, is important, and it could potentially maybe Kelleborn being there. And in regards to the sorry for that. In regards to the reincarnation theory, it does add that extra layer to her decision, and this all adds. So I'm not sure if it was said in the episode whether or not Galadriel knew where he had died, because if he knew he had died, it still adds to the fact that there was a chance he could have been there, and she still did not. But then it's like, do you want to go back to your husband, or do you want to avenge your brother type thing? Maybe that was a dilemma that was in her head, and I think it's quite an evil dilemma, if of course that is the law that's working with here in this show. So I think it could work, and it aligns nicely with the if he is the warrior Hithelge fighting the Balrog, because then of course we don't want to with Glorfindel, of course we all want to see Glorfindel, so I think it works. But I also think as a possibility with Kelleborn, that's another route, so maybe he was at that meeting.
Can I add one other potential Easter egg with regard to Kelleborn's location?
Yeah, please.
So one of the things that was interesting when the sea monster was shown was the realization that there's a sea monster in the original maps that Amazon released in 2019, and it made me wonder whether there are details in those original maps that we should be paying more attention to. They clearly spent a lot of time making sure the names of places and the particular places that were mentioned are of significance. So, for example, all the places where the 7 Palantiri end up are all on the Amazon maps. But I just want to point out that the Amazon maps have 3 islands off the coast of Linden. They have Tol Morwen, they have Tol Fuin, and Tol Himling. And I can't help but wonder if there's why would they have chosen to go to the trouble of including those islands in this map? and labeling them, unless there's something that we're going to find out happened or is happening on those islands. So I'm not sure, but I want to throw that out.
And no, I think that's a good idea. And to add to that, if you see the map, the geography, look how close all three of those islands are to Linden. If there was going to be an elf lords only meeting, it may be Kelleborn somehow an elf lord there, or from there, and he's becoming a lord again in Middle Earth because his return. If either one of the two, it works out with having, Mithril. I'm not sure actually. I don't guess it was. They have basically made Linden a city, haven't they? I think so. I do think the Grey Havens Mithril is going to be separate to their to the Linden, to the Linden city that they've now, instead of it being a kingdom. But I think that mine and James's theories, I think, work potentially may coincide in that regard.
Yeah, I would say that while I do like the theory that Kelleborn was present on the meeting, I don't think it fits that well unless he somehow came back to Linden and connected with all the elf lords there just after Galadriel left, because that's suspicious on his part.
I think Galadriel,
But I think what James said, it would be. I don't know how they would get him, but it would be very interesting if he, survived the War of Wrath on one of these islands. That would be a very interesting way to go about it. I would definitely like that way more than him replacing Glorfindel. But I don't know. The only question I would pose there is then, how would they get him? But still, I would love that if he somehow survived there or something like that.
Well, if Galadriel thinks she can swim from Valinor, then surely Kelleborn can swim from Tolmorwen.
I don't know. You got me there.
I don't actually know if there's much merit to it, but I just can't help but think that places that they bothered to put on the map inexplicably are worth considering whenever we're wondering where could somebody be.
I wonder. Sorry, just a quick one. Sorry. So they also put on one of the maps. They put Lothlorien. I think it was the version of Lorinand. So he could be there for whatever reason. I mean, it's still weird that he wouldn't go look for her, because Galadriel didn't. Like the main Noldor elves, like the main elves from the First Age, did not move. Like they're still there at what's remnants of Beleriand. So it's weird that he wouldn't go look for her, but maybe he is in Lorinand. That would, I think we'll definitely see this.
Yeah.
Forest Kingdom soon. So yeah.
I also wonder if they're going to set up when we find out where he's been, whether that's going to give us an explanation for his dislike of dwarves as well. I'm wondering if dwarves are somehow involved in his still being missing.
He was from Doriath, and they did have some problems with dwarves, if I recall.
Yeah, so that's an interesting thing you bring up. Just a little bit. It was interesting. They confirmed in the Amazon X-ray that he's the particular Kelleborn that came from Doriath, which was a question for me. Which version of Kelleborn are we going to get? Which version of Galadriel are we going to get? They said in the Amazon X-ray that he is the Sindar from Doriath. Yeah, they explicitly said.
Okay, that's very interesting. I didn't know that.
Well, as long as we're getting wild Kelleborn theories, Granola in the chat suggests that maybe he started a nudist colony on Tol Morwen. So,
yeah, the connection of nudism with the family of Morwen is a bit.
Yeah, let's go with another island, please. Let's just go on that one. Let's just leave them at peace.
He's just getting back to nature, just reconnecting with nature.
Yeah, the inebriated part of me does wonder how the drinks are like over there.
Well, let's move on to we've been going for an hour and haven't even gotten past Galadriel, but there's a lot to chew on there. But let's chew on now the scenes between King Durin and Prince Durin, which were probably some of my absolute favorites from the entire series. Peter Mullen is just fantastic as King Durin. Owain Arthur, of course, has been crushing it as Prince Durin. And this scene really was kind of the climax of the growing tensions that we've seen in all their scenes together. They clearly love each other, but they have different attitudes about what Khazad-dûm should be doing. Prince Durin has been wanting to mine Mithril, and King Durin has been forbidding it. And now we throw in the fact that to mine Mithril is to save Prince Durin's best friend, his brother, in Elrond. And King Durin is still saying no. And it's I think that this scene, the scenes between them worked on a lot of levels, both just narratively in terms of the father-son relationship, the political tensions. There's a lot going on there. But there's also deep Tolkienian themes that are coming into conflict with each other. So King Durin believes part of the reason that he gives for the denial of the request by Elrond is that they should respect the fate appointed to the elves, that the elves are essentially trying to cheat death. And he says, and this is a very really wise move by King Durin. It's because it's precisely the Numenoreans' refusal to accept their mortal nature, and then the elves' parallel attempt to fight their own nature by wanting to stop the decay of time in the books that leads to them allowing evil in the form of Sauron to sort of infiltrate their ranks, and it causes all the tragedies that occur in the Second Age. So he is very keyed into a very, very critical issue. So you got to accept the fate of God, basically. He doesn't say as much, but that's kind of what he's getting at. And the exact line is, the fate of elves was decided many ages ago by minds much wiser, much farther seeing than our own. Defy their will, and this entire kingdom might fall, perhaps the entire Middle Earth. Prince Durin, on the other hand, sort of represents and is advocating for the very Tolkienian theme and value of friendship, fidelity to one's friends. And Prince Durin would do anything to save Elrond. And these two themes are very much coming into conflict with each other very directly in this clash between these characters. And I just kind of want to hear everyone's thoughts about that and what ultimately happens, of course, which with, when Prince Durin defies his father's wishes, he is he's no longer the heir. Elrond is kicked out, and it sets Prince Durin on a path with Disa sort of egging him on that maybe we should defy King Durin's wishes altogether and do this on our own. And I think for some sort of greedy reasons, Prince Disa sort of indicates, well, we're going to rule this mountain and every other mountain. Okay, there's a little bit of greed coming in there. So, James, how did you like these scenes between Prince and King Durin?
One of the things I loved about them was that we're really getting such richness in dwarvish attitudes. Like, this is such a lovely departure from the monoculture of all dwarves are the same and they're just humorous and greedy or whatever. Right? This was a lot more nuanced. We get these different, as you brought up, these competing tensions of sort of fate on the one hand and friendship on the other hand. The fact that there's such conflict among different dwarves just gives a depth to the dwarves that we haven't seen in other adaptations, and I absolutely love that. And Peter Mullen's wonderful because he's the one dwarf that doesn't have to put on an accent. He actually talks like that in real life, which is right. Wonderful. But and I mean, also I want to point out, Durin the Fourth makes that one. He's one mistake in that conversation is to basically equate Elrond with his other brothers, his birth brothers, and that seems to ultimately be what ticks Durin the Third off, right? This notion that an elf is at the same level as somebody that his wife had born. I thought it was really interesting that again, that friendship, that connection of friendship is what Durin the Fourth is trying to convey. Prince Durin is trying to convey, but ultimately that's what takes Durin the Third over the edge.
There's still some prejudice in there that rears its ugly head.
Oh, well, I mean, it's sort of understandably. I mean, it was to suggest that somebody else is as close as an actual blood brother. I can see why that would upset one's father. But then, of course, as you mentioned, we get Disa being very Lady Macbeth.
Yes.
And it's going to be really interesting to see it. They're always amongst the most wonderful scenes in every episode is anything with the dwarves. And but in some, I think it's just that richness of perspectives within the dwarves is something that I really love seeing.
Absolutely. And I saw you nodding along. What are your thoughts?
I'm not sure that this is necessarily such a novel thing that the dwarves disagree. Mine's always like rush immediately to Thorin and Balin disagreeing or that sort of thing. And it's the same idea insofar as that it's the same dilemma of is it dwarves first, so to speak, which would be Durin the Third's position, or is it just a kind of more globalistic point of view? and but it was still very, very nice. Except I would say one small exception would be, and this is not something that had troubled me in previous episodes. Peter Mullen in the role of Durin III, very, very, very interestingly, totally underacts the, like, he's not doing a ton of acting, not just because he doesn't have to put on an accent, but you know. And here we see him very towards the later scenes become very emphatic and you know, and it was a little bit like it took a while to get used to, I would say. So that was like to see someone who so like acts so minimally to now be very, very emphatic. I have to imagine being prodded a little bit by Charlotte Brandstrom, the director. Yeah, it was, you know, took a moment to get used to. But otherwise, those were definitely some of the episodes, if not some of the seasons. Best moments, I think. Yeah.
I've heard it described that there's a theory of acting where you actually act, you do very little, and you kind of
Yes.
a blank slate that you're okay there. Yeah, there it is, and the audience kind of can then project onto it.
Yeah. Alec Guinness used to tell David Lean like less is more. Like if I act less, yeah.
Anthony Hopkins is another actor that does that. He just sort of says his line. He has this remarkable ability of saying the lines like he's never thought about them before, which is realistic, right? Because we don't normally think about our lines.
Veltrod Meyer does that on the stage.
Yeah. Strider, how about you?
Yeah, so overall, I generally I really love the Dwarves. Them and surprisingly enough, the Harfoots have been probably two most consistently well done storylines so far. And Durin and Elrond, they nail absolutely every scene, every line. I really, really loved even Elrond's lines about the lore of wherever, them fading and so on. When he's saying it to Durin, you can see that he's not really very comfortable with what he's saying, the actor, but even then he actually kind of manages to sell that. So I really love everything in this storyline. I like that you can kind of understand during the third and during the fourth both. The one thing I dislike is that at least for me, please, I also would love to hear how you guys feel about this, but to me it feels kind of like there's like a meta layer to all the warnings that Durin the Third is doing, because no one knows that Balrog is out there. You know, no one knows that. Like, there's no reason why they would think there is like we are the dwarves and we shouldn't dig too deep. Like we should stop digging at some point. Like
they have a different they have a different explanation though, that you know the mining is perilous, that it could cause a collapse. So there's
but you can. He's talking about shadows and like being buried beneath the mountain. I think he's going a bit over the top. Like it goes more. At least that's how I read it. It goes further than just, you know, we might have like a mine collapse here. So what I would like them for them to do is to have some sort of a reference, like even like a passing comment, something like that, that the dwarves also have. At least maybe the kings of the dwarves have this power of some foresight or something. So just give me a reason in the show why Durin the Third would be like, you know, I have a bad feeling about this, and it's maybe my power of sorts as the king of the dwarves. Perhaps he has this power of foresight to a degree, and that's why he's against this, because it feels like, you know, there's a shadow in the dark or something like that waiting for us, and that will bury us beneath the mountain and so on. And it feels too much on the nose. And also, of course, we know what we see at the end of the episode. So
yeah, we'll get there. I think
I'm not happy with that. Overall, I love it.
Happy with that
but
too. Yeah,
that aspect of Durin, the King Durin, I don't like that.
So I'll actually say I'm on the completely opposite end of the spectrum. I actually really like that they don't go too far in trying to nail down like foresight is a power, and as the king, I have the gift of foresight. That would have cheapened it a little bit to me. I like that this is just kind of appearing in the show as naturally is just kind of his wisdom. And we see foresight prop up in all kinds of places in the Silmarillion and the Lord of the Rings, and I think that's kind of more how it's presented. There are some exceptions to that, glaring exceptions, which I'm sure Hen will point out to me. But I don't know. It feels more natural. And also you see Prince Durin kind of talking about his father as like he's superstitious. Prince Durin doesn't get it. You know, he thinks, and Disa calls him an old fool. There's a foolishness to this belief that King Durin is advancing, even though we know as book readers, well, there's actually a lot of wisdom there. But I want to throw it to Harry, and Harry, I also want to add into the mix. Of course, we do get the Balrog reveal in this episode, and boy, the showrunners have already told us that they're not going to move anything from the Third Age into the Second Age. Whether or not that was a lie, I don't want to believe it was a lie. So I do not want to believe that the Balrog is going to emerge and we're going to see the consequences of the digging in the Second Age, but they're certainly pointing to that. Everything in the show is pointing to that. And there's sort of a Chekhov's gun principle here at play. Why would they show the Balrog in this episode if the Balrog is irrelevant in the story? He can't be irrelevant unless I kind of want it to be irrelevant, but I doubt that it will be. So Harry,
can I just very quickly, and then Harry can. So I think it would be cool if they handled the leaf falling down. The leaf is falling. I think I actually mentioned it in our stream on Friday. The leaf falling down, and we see it fall, and then we can see some like glimpses of like a fire that's away from the screen, that's not on the screen, somewhere below, and then the leaf burns in the air. I think that would have been way more subtle way to have to show us that there's like a Balrog there. But Harry, please.
I think both are linked in a way, and I think the first part is the thing I liked about the Durin scene. It shows the pride. It shows the pride of the dwarves, which I really liked, because that is an important part of their character. Then at the same time, with Durin the Third, also they do have pride, but they're not stupid in a way. They have that sense of wisdom, and we saw that with the foresight. And I also agree that with going into it too much, like go to the technicalities of like how stuff like magic, stuff like that works, it's always better to have the essence and keep it, raw, more ambiguous. So I did quite like that. And insofar to the Balrog, I think it's interesting because, again, you mentioned it. What's the point in showing it? Is it going to be like a looming thing that, we don't really see again? I doubt it. I think we all here understand. I think if they've gone to that much detail, it was in the trailer, everything. It's interesting because I think the fact is they showed it in the trailer and it's been nearly every single thing. I feel like it's interesting that they've gone down that route and not have make it a surprise. But with, of course, the Third Age, that is when it actually happens. And the discussion of bringing it back is going to be quite a technical one. And do I think they will do it? I think yes and no. And more than no, but the reason I give you might be initially saying, why have you given such a, yes and no answer? I think if there is a technical way you can have the dwarves know the Balrog's there and maybe fight it at least once, but not actually have the fall of Khazad-dûm, or maybe think they defeated it in some way, and then in future, then of course a stiff separate plotline happens. Anatar's now in a region, they can move on from that now. They could talk about the rings and whatever, or different plotline happens. Who knows? Maybe later on the show they're preparing for the Last Alliance, but they have already maybe thought they have defeated the Balrog. Then of course in the Third Age, everything still technically happens as it should. So I think that is one way you can get around it, or maybe them even just fight it off once or twice and then think maybe it's not big a deal. No, of course it's weird to think a massive fire breathing Balrog is not a big deal, but I actually lean to the idea that maybe they do defeat it, but they don't. But then they don't defeat it. They defeat it, but don't defeat it, and that leads to the fall. And I think that is I know, everybody wants to get on to it. I'll let you guys go to it.
So back when we first saw the Balrog in the trailer, I had a long Twitter thread about this, and just reading within Lord of the Rings, which is of course what they primarily have access to, it's clear that Durin's Bane was not the only Balrog that survived the Great War. There were others that hid themselves underground. We're told that Durin's Bane lay hidden since the Great War, since the War of Wrath, and of course that it appeared in Third Age 1980. So at the time, this was when the trailer had come out. We hadn't seen any episodes yet. I suggested that there's essentially 4 possibilities of who that Balrog is, right? It could be a First Age flashback. We know that's no longer true. It could be a Balrog other than Durin's Bane. That would seem odd now. The chances of there being 2 Balrogs in Khazad-dûm seems odd. So ruling that one out, the 2 other possibilities that I put forward were that it's Durin's Bane, but he remains hidden. If that's true, why show him so early on why are we seeing him in the first season if he's going to remain hidden until the Third Age? And the only other thing I came up with at the time was that, sort of maybe similar along the lines of what Harry's saying, that somebody else does find him, but perhaps doesn't live to tell the tale, right? Because we're told that he was hidden until the Third Age. So it's possible we'll see. That's from the point of view of the people telling the account in Lord of the Rings. It's possible he does get found by some people, and news doesn't get out.
Yeah. Wouldn't the Occam Razor argument be that they're moving this plot point earlier? I think that's a much more simple and much more compelling. Like, they just put it into the Second Age. It's a convenient way to have some sort of resolution for the Khazad-dûm storyline, which otherwise doesn't have a resolution, really. Like, it doesn't have the kind of definitive
that's a really good
ending that the other ones
That's
do.
a really good point. If they don't have Durin's Bane appear in the Second Age, we're left with a Second Age Khazad-dûm story, which is basically after Sauron attacked Eriador, they close the door, and we don't hear anything about them.
Yes. So
Right,
there's that.
That's kind of dull, right?
But also just generally, some artists lie about their works. There are lots of artists like that. That's just inherent to the way that some people talk. George Lucas comes to mind, but so just Sergio Leone, David Lean was sometimes like that. It just happens.
Yep.
They're showmen. They're going to make a show out of it, and they're going to make a show out of showing it, in a sense, if that makes sense.
You're talking in relation to the showrunners saying that they're not going to move it from the
I think it's a lie.
Yep.
Maybe Soberchen wouldn't say that, but I do.
Yeah, I think it could be. I think it could be the case, but I think they could have the War of the Last Alliance. The ending of the show, the conclusion of the show. A lot of people are going to die. A lot of them. And one of the things that happens during the War of the Last Alliance is that all the races, save the elves, were divided. So I would maybe, the way perhaps I'm just brainstorming on the spot now, but perhaps have one part of the dwarves somehow get corrupted. I think we had some rumors about religious sects in Khazad-dûm, so maybe there's a division there, and then you can have two sides of the conflict in Khazad-dûm. One of basically the good guys and the bad guys, and there's a conflict, and they can be on both sides of the Last Alliance. And that's maybe how they would conclude it. I don't know if I want to. Sorry, if I want to see everybody die everywhere, and then also Durin dies and Khazad-dûm goes to dark and everything just goes like, that's such a dark way to close the whole show. Because many people are going to die.
Yeah, but Hamlet ends like that. The Ring.
Yeah, but Tolkien is a Hamlet. Like I wonder, like how they will probably.
Like that.
Yeah, but they will probably make, like, Tolkien is bittersweet. He's not as tragic as Shakespeare. Like, there's a lot of tragic stuff, but there's always hope and all that, and it's going to be very hard to balance out all that doom and gloom that will inevitably come and make it hopeful, especially if they add, oh, by the way, this kingdom of wars that you loved for 5 seasons, it's just gonna burn. And you need to really balance that out with some hope at the end. I think it's going to be a very big challenge, but I think I think you may be right, because the Balrog is there, and he's not there just to show up in this.
Okay, I
basically
have a theory. I
post-credit
have a
scene.
theory that might work for everyone. All right, we're fully in speculation town here, but and your point is very good, that it would create a nice end to the Khazad-dûm arc, to have there be some
That
sort
is
of
correct.
either in this season or a subsequent season or the whole show.
No, subsequent, yeah.
To have some sort of cataclysm related to the Balrog, or the Balrog wrapped into some sort of significant event. And James, your point that, well, maybe there is some dwarves interact with the Balrog, but they don't live to tell the tale. So as far as anyone who's living knows, he's been sleeping this whole time. I think that we all know King Durin is going to die at some point in this series.
Yeah.
What if, this is just fully speculation territory, the way he dies, he falls down a chasm somewhere, and he sees the Balrog. He sees the shadow that is going to threaten the kingdom, that confirms everything that he's been worried about. And that's how King Durin dies. No one else knows how King Durin dies, because he's fallen into this cavern and he's unretrievable. And so Prince Durin has to mourn his death and all that, not knowing that the Balrog is down there, and not knowing that his continued mining of Mithril, which Prince Durin now does with reckless abandon because King Durin isn't there to restrain him, will eventually, outside the scope of the show, lead to Khazad-dûm's downfall. If they approach it that way, we could kind of have everything, have our cake and eat it too.
Yeah, that would be a very good way to wrap it up.
That was kind of the way Lakitia speculated that it would be as the episode was running. Yeah, but yeah, I don't know.
And since we're there, shout out to Lakitia. Hopefully, she's going to join us next week. We are missing her very dearly.
Very, very much. Yes.
Yeah, and before we move on from the dwarvish plot lines, I got to say it is really a shame that we couldn't get both Lakitia and Varking on this stream, because Varking, I'm sure, is just at war with himself. He's loved every single dwarf scene, and now the dwarves are, disagreeing. He probably is having an identity crisis.
Torn in two. Yes.
I'll tell you his basic mindset. He's happy that they shut off
they're the best,
and that Durin's Bane is not going to be in this, which is tough luck.
Varking would say that there's in every person there's two dwarves. One is Durin the third, one is Durin the fourth, or some wisdom like that.
Well, and Lakitia would probably have a thing or two to say about the dwarves for kicking out Elrond and basically sentencing all the elves to death, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't presume to speak in her name, but I've made some of the points that she had made earlier about Durin the Free being a little kind of overly emphatic, and also I think we both agreed that the Balrog reveal is a little cheesy on its own. So yeah.
Well, so let's move on now to, we got two more major plot lines to cover. We'll try and do it relatively quickly, but let's touch on the Harfoots and the Stranger. I think actually what happened in this episode is very, very interesting, not just because it was very consequential to the entire group, because their caravan was destroyed, the consequences of which are very obvious and significant. But Nori, at the very start of this show, she started with, she's yearning for more meaning in her life. And when she discovers the Stranger, she thinks that she's found it. She thinks that fate has brought the Stranger to her and that she's destined for bigger things. And so that's kind of, what her inner struggle is throughout all these episodes. And yet in each episode, we have seen the Stranger be a danger to her more and more. And in episode 7, it kind of becomes too much. She's too afraid. Everyone else is too afraid. They don't hate the Stranger. They know he's good, but he's just too dangerous. So he's asked to leave. And that moment for Nori, I think, is very consequential because it destroys in her her desire for something greater. That's kind of, she despairs of that. And we see this moment where she says, I'm just a Harfoot. I was kind of a fool for thinking there was anything more. That is very significant for her arc. Of course, there's then a reversal because the mystics come and her dad gives a rousing speech and she kind of gets back on the trail and goes to hunt down the Stranger. But we do see, she has kind of, this is probably the most significant emotional moment for Nori in the entire season. So James, let's hear from you about, and there's tons to talk about. I'm just kind of giving my opening thoughts, but we get the mystics, we get, he somehow heals the entire grove. Who does that tell us he is? Feel free to go in any direction you like with these characters.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a few really interesting things here. One is just yet another case where the only damage that the stranger does, including in this episode to Dilly, with the tree collapsing, tree branch falling on her, is always accidental, right? He's always well-meaning. There's no malice at all, it seems, in the stranger, which I think is really going to turn out to be important in terms of who he ends up being. It just keeps being reinforced. But that, just to sort of jump ahead to the end of this part of the story, that makes the actions of the mystics just even more shocking. And that's why that I use the word shocking at the beginning of this this discussion as my one word for the episode. Just the wanton destruction that the mystics didn't care of the result of what they did with the fire. It was almost kind of like, oh, side effect, you've completely lost your well-being. We've burnt it all just in one tiny little action. That really shocked me. It's made clear, one of the things I've been uncertain about with regard, once we discovered in, I guess, episode 6 that the mystics are looking for the stranger, the question sort of was, are they looking for him because they're on his side or because they're not on his side? It seems pretty clear now that they're at different purposes to the stranger. They're certainly acting in opposite ways. So again, what that tells us about who the stranger is and who they are, who sent them, what their goal is. Are they ultimately trying to stop the stranger now? It's going to be really, that's probably the thing I'm most interested to see play out maybe in the next episode.
Are we allowed to say spoilers from what Amazon have released promotional material wise or not?
I think we should. I think it's important.
You mean like
if Amazon
the trailer
shared it?
Like trailers, previews.
Okay.
I think that's all.
Interviews.
10 seconds. Okay, we'll get 10 seconds. We're gonna say something that might. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So basically, Amazon just released about a few hours ago a new promo thing, and it's basically got lines where the mystics say to Meteor Man, you are Sauron. So and then they said, and they say they work for Sauron and you are him, and that's you can find it afterwards. Yeah, I think that came out, so I think that clearly shows.
Yeah, but there was also an interview of Charlotte Brandstrom that they want to capture the stranger on the behalf of Sauron. So
yeah.
I think those lines, that's much more important than lines in the trailer that could be, mixed together, presented out of context.
Unless they say you are him, so, and you can see them visibly speaking. So unless Halbrand is, there.
Well, that's the exact line that Galadriel spoke to Halbrand regarding being the king of the Southlands, right? She says, she says you are him. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So I think it's important to bear in mind until the next episode comes out that indeed it's possible that they put like two different sentences together and made like a feint, But I wanna say two things about the identity of the stranger that for me felt very important in this episode. So first of all, he heals the nature, he heals the grove, and we had references to Avala, who takes care of the living things, and the emissary of that particular Avala, being Yavanna, was Radagast. And I'm actually, after this episode, I'm actually leaning way more in the camp Radagast, because also, where do the Harfoots point him towards? Greenwood the Great, and we know that that's the place where Radagast dwelt. So I'm actually starting to lean more towards Camp Radagast, and I think it would be a very, I think he is one of the Istari. I'm 9% sure he's one of the Istari, and the cultists are, for whatever reason, wrong. They will be proven wrong in the next episode. That's where I stand at the moment. That's my prediction. But I was thinking he was Gandalf. I was hoping he was one of the Blue Wizards. But now I'm starting to move because of the last episode. I think I'm starting to move towards Camp Radagast. I think those were like two pretty big pointers towards that possibility.
Yeah, I still think he's Gandalf, but yeah.
Yeah, he could end up being, but I think these were why is he going there, you know?
I think in terms of what they need him to be, they need him to be Gandalf more so than Radagast, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like Radagast is ultimately very minor in the grand scheme of things, doesn't carry a lot of significance to audiences, whereas with Gandalf, it's the same line of theirs. Is it really Middle-earth without Gandalf? And
Right.
you know,
So my
much
wife
more
is,
so than Hobbits, I would say. Gandalf
Yeah.
is much more iconic than the Hobbits.
my wife, who's not a book reader at all, has been watching it, and she's thought the whole time it's Gandalf. So I mean, that could be misdirection aimed at the sort of casual watcher. But
Yeah, but it would
she's
be
picking up all
disappointing
the
to them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, she's
You know?
she's
they
definitely
wouldn't
on.
want to do that. Yeah.
But to Strider's point, I'm certainly back to being at least Istar
Yes.
after this episode.
Because you had sort of been carrying a torch for the stranger as a Balrog theory, right?
Well, that was partly because I thought if I go for the wackiest theory and it turns out like no one cares if you get it wrong, but if you get the unusual thing right, people are like, "Whoa, how did you guess that?" So that's partly why I was going with that. But yeah, I think
and I do
Istar's
also,
my hope.
James, I do remember we did spend quite a few hours in a pub talking about it as well. If you remember, all
We
those
did.
months
We
ago.
did. We did. So
Yes.
it could partly be your
Yeah.
fault, Harry.
No, it was your theory, not mine. Not mine.
Yeah, but you
Yeah,
know,
right.
as far as him going to the Greenwood, though, the Harfoots have kind of been in the general area all the time, so you'd imagine that he'd point them in. You'd imagine they would go into a landmark that would be familiar to us, you know. So it wouldn't.
Yeah,
be
but you know,
like-
a landmark that's also familiar is the Misty Mountains or Anduin. I mean, I don't disagree. That's a really good point. But you know, of all the things to point him at, this would be
even though
starring.
there's
Would be
no
star.
forest in the shot.
That's
They did explicitly
points to
mention.
Radagast.
They did
Greenwood.
explicitly mention the Greenwood, which was the
Yeah.
fact that they've been
even
bothered to
even
do
though
that.
there's no forest in the shot.
And they should be presumably hundreds of
points at it.
miles away.
He points at it, and I don't see a forest, and I'm like looking. You're seeing a forest. I'm not seeing a forest. It's not there. It's like someone forgot to comp it in. I don't know what the hell.
So predictions: do people think that these hobbits are going to survive, or is there death for some of them in their future? Yeah, there's a lot of ways you could go with it, but you know they have gone off trail, which is completely counter to. It's their most sacred rule of self-preservation within their community is you do not go off trail. It's one of the two things that they chant when they're doing their their dance during the celebration or whatever. It is so important to them, and they're breaking that rule. Is that going to be, well, they're going to have good fortunes and thus proving that the rule was foolish, or are we seeing someone die, some little short person die in the future? Anyone can.
I think it's quite possible some of them will die. Like I think there's definitely a conflict. I think one of the shorts that we got, short videos from Amazon, maybe last week, I think. The what's her name? The mystic with the very short hair. It looks like it looks like she's in some sort of a conflict with someone. And I don't think it was this scene from this episode. I think it's a scene that we haven't seen in this episode. And to me, it kind of felt that the trees behind her were moving. It's been a while since I saw this video, so bear with me. But it felt like the trees behind her were moving in the same way that the trees moved when a stranger was upset or whatever in that scene like a few episodes ago. And then the trees, darken and like creak and so on. It felt like so. I think they're definitely going to come to they will definitely have a conflict, the stranger and the mystics, and it's quite possible at least one of the Harfoots or two or who knows how many may die. But I think at least one of them will be in danger.
And Kyle pulled up the perfect moment. It seems like Sadek answered that question. He says, "Doesn't matter. We're all going to die." So
oh no! Thank you, Kyle. Okay, well, that's it. But also, the line in when they find Meteor Man or Stranger, and I think Nori or Poppy, one of them, says, something. What if what we're doing now is going to make us guilty for everything everything bad that happens in the next 3 seasons, or something? They said something like that. So I like maybe this is also the same type of foreshadowing there. Who knows?
Right. James, can you give us a little bit of word nerdery on what the stranger says when he is healing the tree?
Absolutely, would love to. And I love this because the words that he speaks, they're all a lot of them are words that we actually find used differently or used in other places in Lord of the Rings. So he says Akiuta, which means sort of refresh. He says Inviata, which means renew, and Inviatar is actually a title that is taken on by Aragorn, where it means the renewer. So it's nice that gets used. He says Lotte Na. He says Lotte Na, which is an instruction, be flowering. And then he says Akuita or live, which is that same verb is used in the Iglerio scene in Lord of the Rings when they're wishing that the halflings would live a long life. We get that verb as well. So it's refresh, renew, be flowered, and live is what he's saying in Quenya.
En Vignata that is on the screen. Radagast speaks that line on screen. So yeah, that would be a thing in the Radagast thing. But it's just. No, I knew that. I knew that as he was saying.
I didn't. So
just to explain that, like, is the marker in Quenya for making something an imperative. When you want to turn a verb into an instruction, a command, that's what the is. And then N is literally to do something again, and Vinya is new, something that's new. So it's literally to become renewed. Yeah.
Yeah, Radagast spell is renewed be's life, the life of the the hedgehog. I don't know. So yeah.
Okay, Han, thank you. You just pushed me even further into Camp Radagast.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
I picked that up immediately, but it still doesn't convince me that he's actually Radagast. It's just the sentiment in both cases is the same. Small wonder that it should be the same line.
Okay, fair enough.
Well, and we did get a seemingly random reference to Yavanna by Arondir in a prior episode, and he didn't mention her by name, but he said
not by name, but yes.
It is believed that one of the Valar, I forget exactly what it says, but protects all growing things and the people that tend to them. And Radagast, of course, was the Astar chosen by Yavanna, at least if the Unfinished Tales version of how the Astari get there is to believed. And so he's a lover of birds and beasts and plants and a servant of Yavanna. And so it would be a nice little connection there if they're sort of seeding the existence of Yavanna subtly through other characters and other references, which will make his reveal as Radagast a little bit more meaningful especially to the new viewer.
Who chose Saruman? Was it Aule? Because I think Olorin or Gandalf was Varda and Manve, right? So who was the one who chose Saruman? I think it was Aule.
Aule would make sense. That would be my guess, just from what he's like.
Yeah, and I think the two blue wizards were Orome.
Yes, they were definitely Orome.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Radagast is going up on the list, definitely.
Yeah, you've almost convinced me entirely, Strider. Yeah.
I'm still hoping for Blue Wizard just because they're the ones I've always wanted to see, and we know nothing about them, and I want to know. But Radagast. I would enjoy a better depiction of Radagast. Not to hate on the acting performance by the actor that played Radagast in the Hobbit films, but they deliberately made that character kind of cartoonish. And although Radagast is perceived by Saruman to be a fool, and Gandalf kind of acknowledges that he's maybe not the most serious wizard, he's still a wizard and not a cartoon. So I want to see maybe a slightly more serious take on Radagast.
Yeah, I think I would very much appreciate that way more than if he was Gandalf. Like I'm not gonna mind if he's Gandalf, but I think exactly for the reason that you just said, it would be fantastic to see another wizard who is actually a good guy and to see him like a serious figure, and having Stranger as Radagast, I think that would be a really, really great move. Though
And,
I'm still rooting for
if Radagast is bumbling, the Stranger has been pretty bumbling thus far. So
True.
Exactly.
Although-
and just somebody on somebody on the channel is saying, wouldn't Radagast care about the dead fireflies? He did care about the dead fireflies. He was really
he
quite
mentioned it.
broken up. He was really broken up, but that's why he thought he was peril.
Right.
I'm
Because
Peril. Yeah.
Well, let's get into, I think, our final storyline with the Numenoreans. Before we do that, I just want to remind people to get your super chats in. If you joined us kind of late, we were raffling off some goodies by our featured artist this week, the Nerdy Alchemist. If you are the winner of the raffle this week, you'll get a full set of their stickers. They have really cute kind of cartoonish stickers and charms, and you'll get a custom profile pick illustration from the Nerdy Alchemist. So get in your super chats and we'll do a raffle at the end of this stream. So the last one, the Numenoreans here, and I kind of want to focus on Elendil and Miriel. Elendil loses his son, Miriel loses her eyesight. And I think we can kind of chart it back to when we're introduced to these characters. In the early episodes, both Elendil and Miriel are closeted faithful. They're not only hiding their beliefs from others, but kind of also from themselves. They're trying to assimilate. Elendil believes that it's for the best for his family to kind of put that in the past. Miriel believes it's for the good of the nation, because she kind of buys into the notion that Tar Palantir and him trying to rejoin the elves almost was the downfall of Numenor. So she was kind of trying to push that aside as well. But of course, both of them hold that in their hearts. But Elendil was also struggling with the loss of his wife, and that grief was kind of intermixed with this whole relationship to the faithful. And of course, now Galadriel comes along and reawakens the faithful inside of both of them, and they go off to fight. But now they both suffered a major loss, and their paths diverge going into the season finale. Elendil now, in addition to losing his wife, has lost his son, and he is beyond grief-stricken. He is not himself anymore, and he blames Galadriel. He wants to turn his back on Middle-earth. So his loss fully demoralizes him. He's pushed into despair. He's pushed away from the faithful. This is not the Elendil that we will see at the end of the Second Age, who is really becomes the king of the Numenoreans and leads them in the fight against Sauron. In contrast, Miriel, who loses her eyesight, emerges, I think, a stronger, more resolved leader. She's lost her sight, but in other ways, she seems to be seeing more clearly than ever, vowing to return to destroy evil. So what do you think about the directions of Elendil and Miriel in this episode? Let's start with James again.
Yeah, so I mean, it's heartbreaking to see what happens to Elendil. Of course, we know Isildur is going to survive, but Elendil doesn't. And just the acting from Lloyd Owens and just the devastation on his face is incredible. And the fact that he blames Galadriel to the extent that he does, it's again, I used the word shocking at the start to describe this episode, and that was another aspect of it. Again, we know Isildur's alive, but that doesn't take away at all what we feel from Elendil. It's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out. Maybe it's just the reappearance of Isildur being alive that turns things around for Elendil. But there's certainly going to be some really interesting stuff ahead in terms of how he comes to terms with Galadriel and the not the mission of the faithful, but the belief that what the faithful are faithful to. Miriel, I think, is going to be a really interesting one, and her return to Numenor is, I think, going to be really interesting in terms of whether that's like, are they going to use Miriel's blindness as an alternative explanation for Pharazôn's actions rather than that sort of taking as a wife against her will. I suspect they'll skip the wife thing and make,
which is a shame,
Pharazôn's usurping based in part on her blindness. That's where I suspect they may go with that.
I agree. Yeah.
Go on.
So I want to stick with you, James, and I do think we will see in the next episode. They already said they're going to be loading the boats and they're going to go back to Numenor. I think we'll go back to Numenor in the next episode. I don't think we'll have any more of the Numenoreans in Middle Earth. I'm curious though. Do you think we'll have any scenes in Middle Earth and before they depart? Will Isildur be reunited with Elendil before they leave, or is Elendil going back to Numenor, fully believing his son has died? In which case, there's going to be a long period of time where he believes Isildur's dead, and Iarian's going to think that he's dead. There's going to be all kinds of ramifications there.
So it's always interesting thinking about these questions, whether we're talking about what I would like to see, what I think will happen in the show, what I think would be good storytelling. They're not necessarily all the same, always the same answers. But I think, so maybe this is one way I could see it playing out, that Isildur is not found, certainly while Elendil is still on Middle-earth. Elendil does go back to Numenor, thinking that Isildur is dead. We may not even see Isildur again in episode 8. That would be a really strong dramatic choice to make, to leave us hanging, or certainly people, non-book readers, hanging about Isildur. Maybe that will be one of the twists towards the end of episode 8, is that we find out Isildur is still alive. I wonder if Isildur will end up maybe going to Pelagir, where we've heard that Bronwyn and Arondir are going, which is interesting in and of itself, given that Pelagir was settled by the faithful. It's still going to be interesting to me where the Numenorean bits of the Numenorean story have been moved around to. Because obviously the fact that I was surprised actually to discover that Pelagir exists. That was a surprise to me. So it's going to be interesting to see what they've done there with the timeline. But yeah, if I had to put money on one thing, it would be that Elendil leaves not knowing that Isildur is alive, and that Isildur will maybe show up in Pelagir, found by Bronwyn and Arondir towards the end of episode 8. That's my prediction.
Well, Hen, how about you? Do you agree or disagree with James's prediction?
I mostly agree. I think he will be in the next episode for a couple of reasons. One, there's only so much open-endedness that I think they will want to leave on episode 8 of this, especially when season 2 is so far in the future.
Yes.
And I think both paying off it's such a shame that Lakity isn't here, the Legends of the Four shot of Beric riding off. It's like that's a setup for a payoff, clearly.
Oh yes.
And also it's a good device by which to keep Adar in the story as well, because Isildur is where Adar and the orcs still are. So that's
true.
Whether he will be reunited with, I think he will go to Pelagir. Whether he will be reunited with the Numenoreans consequently of that is something I'm not sure about, because the Numenoreans do send I don't know, not a division, but a troop with the Southlanders to Pelagir. Yes. So those people will eventually also go on a boat, presumably, and maybe Isildur will be with them, or maybe, more interestingly, he will stay in Pelagir for, I don't know, the better part of season 2 or something, and get to know the locals, and maybe that. So yeah, that's we'll have to wait and see. I am intrigued by. I think James, the reason you were surprised is by the Pelagir reveal, is that earlier episodes have given the impression that the Numenoreans have not ventured back to Middle Earth at all, and yet here is the Numenorean colony. So.
Well, I mean, I've suggested before on Twitter that we're going to get a really interesting combination of a bunch of Numenorean kings in Pharazôn, right? That we're kind of potentially getting a bit of Minas Tirith, Antanamir, and his grandfather and him. We're going to kind of get an amalgam of a bunch of them, but it's not clear in doing that where certain things like the settlement of Umbar or the settlement of Pelagir fit in. Yeah.
I have to say, that's one of the things that disappointed me, that they didn't go for something more exotic like Umbar. I think that would have been a much more interesting place to send these people to than Pelagir.
Although it occurs to me, if Isildur goes to Pelagir, I can imagine at the very end of season 5. Sorry, not the end of season 5. The beginning of season 5, when after the fall of Numenor. I can imagine Isildur kind of showing up again in Pelagir, and saying,
Yeah.
okay, Anarian and I are gonna settle this
Yeah.
area.
Yeah, I think that's the setup basically.
Yeah.
And also to speak to the point of Muriel, I really wouldn't like. I think it is that her blindness would be the catalyst for Pharazon's coup instead of the But I really wouldn't like that. I really wouldn't
I
like
think
the PGing of the thing that goes down with Pharazon.
I think it would be
really
cool.
irk
Sorry, I thought you were that. I thought
No, I'm not.
I agree. It would be great. It would be very interesting to see Muriel and Pharazon and everything that happens with two of them. It would be great to see that on screen because it's something that people wouldn't expect from Middle Earth, from Tolkien, based on the most popular, things that most people know about. That would be something totally out of blue. But yeah, it's a question whether we will see it or not. But I was very happy when I heard that Pelargir was mentioned, especially because in the first few episodes, one of my biggest complaints regarding Numenor's storyline was that it seems that they don't have a navy. It seems that they haven't been to Middle Earth, which means they haven't had the colonies. We discussed this several times. Like there's a lot of thematic importance there that they had the colonies there. And for me, that was, the Star Wars moment, a surprise, but a welcome one to be sure. Kyle has the photo prepared, but it was absolutely like that. That was literally my reaction, a surprise, but a very, very welcome one. So I'm very happy that we got that, and I think it's going to be very interesting. I don't think Isildur will end up. I don't think he will end up going to Numenor this season. I think he will go to Pelargir. And while it would be interesting to go to Umbar, sadly, I think one of the problems of the show is that it has this very strict constraints, as far as we know, 8 episodes and 5 seasons. So I think it would be, sadly, again, too complicated to go to Umbar and deal with all that. So setting up Pelargir and Anarion and Isildur later coming back here, that makes a lot of sense to me. But one thing I want to say regarding Muriel, I mentioned it also on our Friday stream. The line that her father says, "What awaits you in Middle Earth is darkness."
Yes.
That was absolutely fantastic. So it works on several ways. It works, of course, as the darkness, as like the literal darkness that is now, the land of shadows. It works as Muriel losing her eyesight, but also it could work potentially in a much deeper way for Muriel and because if she is the queen of Numenor, it could work in a very special way for the Numenor. Numenor is now swearing, like she made an oath for Numenor to come to Middle Earth as conquerors, because otherwise, first they came to Middle Earth as teachers, as friends, as guides, and this could be the first step towards the actual doom of Numenor, because they are now, like, their queen is literally blind, and this may be a very, very interesting, very cool metaphor for the downwards path that Numenor will be enrolling from now. At least it looks like it. I think this was one of the better moments regarding the whole overall plan. If it goes that way, I think it will. I think this was a really, really cool metaphor here.
Yeah, I agree. I think that Muriel will be bringing Numenor's army back for good reasons, or at least her heart is good, which Galadriel told us in her dialogue with Theo that's the way men are judged. That's important. But also, to effectuate that plan, she's going to be bringing a massive, massive navy, most likely, which will give Pharazon the means to accomplish his goals, which is basically to subjugate Middle Earth. We already know that he's going along with Muriel because he thinks at the end of this, the elves will serve us. We can install a puppet king, we can get trade and bounty, and so I don't think that Pharazon is going to usurp Muriel. I think that he is going to continue to go along with her fully because her plans are aligning with his, and over time he will simply start gathering more power unto himself, which will not be difficult because she is blind, and he may be able to subtly not overtly but subtly subvert her authority, while he'll publicly be behind her, but subtly be subverting her authority and gathering more power to himself,
which
while
is
bringing power to Middle Earth. Yeah,
which there's a wonderful irony to, given what Sauron's going to do to him.
Yes. Oh, yeah. So, Strider, I think you're right on that we are seeing the seeds of the future enslavement of the middlemen by the Numenoreans, and they come as saviors, but very quickly that's going to turn, not over the, hundreds of years like it occurs in the actual Second Age. It's not going to be a slow arc. It's going to be very, very rapid. Everything is being compressed here, but they're still kind of getting the order right. I mean, they are coming to save the middlemen, and in this first sort of with this expedition force, 3 ships or 5 ships or whatever it was. Now they're going to be coming back again to save them, but with an army strong enough to conquer all of Middle Earth and all the free peoples within it. So I wonder if we'll see that in the season finale, or if they'll save that for future seasons. So let's go ahead and I think we're at a good point. We've covered all the major plot lines, and we usually don't do this, predictions for the next episode, but we are walking into the season finale. This is it. I can't believe it's it. It's felt like it's blown by. I'm really sad that this isn't a 20 episode show. 8 episodes is not enough.
Couldn't agree more.
But nonetheless, this is the season finale, and I would just like to hear from everyone. What do you hope will be accomplished in this season finale? What do you think they need to accomplish for it to be a satisfying ending, I guess is the way I want to phrase that. And let's start with James. And before you answer, James, I just want to put one more shout out at the end of this little discussion we're having here. We're going to do our raffle. So last chance to get your super chats in. Got a couple minutes. All right, James.
Okay. So, well, one thing we didn't really talk about is whether anyone's changed their mind about Halbrand and his potential connection to Sauron. I am wondering if we'll at least get some resolution on that in episode 8. I would certainly like to. I think there's a certain number of mystery boxes that need to be opened and revealed in this episode for it to be a satisfying season. I don't know that we're going to get much. We're going to come back a little bit, I think, to the Eregion scenario. I don't know if we will get a full-on Anatar reveal in Eregion yet. I certainly don't think we're going to get any ring forging. Although, do people have opinions on what's in the pouch that Halbrand carries? Because I'm wondering if that's some kind of prototype of a ring of power. But anyway,
a token to enslave him. You're thinking that like Sauron is somehow Halbrand using that.
Yeah, item? I think they're forging. They're using something else to forge. I think.
Yeah. So I mean, I think we're going to have to come back to that, right? I mean, we're going to need a reminder that this is the Rings of Power. That this is fundamentally a show about how the Rings of Power came about and what ended up happening to those rings.
Yes.
Even though, the Numenorean story is the other big Second Age story, I think we're going to need to make a little bit more progress on the rings. I don't know that we're going to get the forging though, so it's going to be interesting to see. In terms of other things that get resolved, I mean, we didn't talk about the mithril healing the leaf, which, you know what, I was kind of, if that was the extent of what mithril could do healing wise, I would probably be okay with it. That sits a lot better with me than completely saving all the elves by spring.
How do you feel about? Sorry to jump in. How do you feel about the Corey Olsen's note that? Okay, it establishes that the mithril heals whatever is rotting the tree, but we still haven't established that it is true that the rot in the tree actually correlates or relates to the fading and death of the elves.
So my hope, if we're talking about how the sort of mithril problem, fading of the elves problem actually gets resolved, I am hoping that they are simply mistaken about what the tree rot means. and that yes, whatever's causing the tree rot can be healed by the mithril. I think we've seen that. That's proven to us now. Mithril does actually save the tree. How that relates to the fading of the elves, I'm still open to and hoping partly that maybe it's a misinterpretation that somehow the elves are going to fade as a result of that tree going. But yeah, I think what's caught that it would be nice if that were resolved too in episode 8 is what's causing the rotting of the tree. So yeah, I'll let others talk now.
Well, and I wonder, and I'll open this to anybody, of course, but if it is the case that the whole Song of the Roots of Ithagler myth is a myth within the universe, it is a lie, a deception. I don't think that the elves can be disabused of that deception yet, because they're setting it up that is the motivation for them to craft the rings. And if they discover that it's a lie too early, then they have to create some other motive for them to craft the rings.
Well, the song is not. There's two issues here, right? That people have had law-wise that I think are quite separate. One is the song, which explains sort of the origin story of mithril.
Yes.
I think that's independent of the healing abilities of
Good
the fading
point.
of the elves. I think there's
good
three
point.
things. I think there's three separate things. One is, how did mithril come about? And a lot of people just really have a problem with the idea that there's some lost Silmaril and blah blah. It's light.
Really, just conceptually with the idea that we need to know how mithril came about. Did anyone read Tolkien thinking, "Gee, I wonder where mithril comes from"? Like, no,
Right, so
never. It never crossed my mind.
Yeah. So that's one thing. The second thing, which I think is separate, is this idea that mithril can heal. I have no problem with this idea that mithril can heal. And then the third thing is the fading of the elves, the fact that they need to do this healing by spring, otherwise the elves. I have a problem with 1 and 3 a lot more than I do with 2, but I think they're all separate. I don't. Some of them could turn out to be true, with others turning out to be a lie. So the song could be completely made up, and the fading and the healing capabilities of mithril still be true. We know the healing capabilities of mithril are true. We saw that demonstrated.
I think they're all true. I think we would wish that they weren't, but I think they're all true. Because for them to not be true would be to lower the stakes back down, and you just don't do that if you can help it. You don't introduce something that will raise the stakes and then say, "Nah, it was a lie." It would be like in the Fellowship of the Ring. Frodo gets to Rivendell, and then everyone goes, "Nah, that's not really Sauron's ring."
It's just. Yeah, exactly.
You don't do that,
Yeah, you can't turn around and tell Durin, "Oh well, it's just the tree in Linden that's going to die by spring."
Yeah,
right.
Right. I think they could make all this not lose the sense of stakes if they just don't go forward with the actual creation myth of mithril.
Yes,
like if they just leave that be, everything else could still work in relatively similar way. So I think that wouldn't be a huge problem like that.
Mm.
But in terms of things that need to get resolved in episode 8, I think we need to. I'm hoping Halbrand. If there is a Halbrand Sauron connection, that gets. We find out about that, and there's some movement towards the forging of the rings, and we find out what's actually causing the problems with the tree in Linden.
And if there's a reveal about Halbrand, whether or not he is or is not Sauron, do you think the way they would reveal that in the season finale would be something that only book readers will understand, or will it be fully revealed and made explicit for everybody?
I think it would be unfair for them to do something that only makes sense to book readers. I don't think they would do that. I've said this on Twitter. I'll say this here. I suspect there is a sense in which Halbrand is Sauron, but it's not a simple Halbrand equals Sauron equation. I imagine it's going to be one of those things where the people that think that Halbrand is Sauron and the people that think Halbrand is not Sauron are going to be disagreeing about who got it right. after the episode's finished.
I hope that's not the case, but I can see it happening.
I can just imagine it's something like, whether it's the splitting, they split Sauron in two, Horcrux kind of thing, whether it's the pouch is somehow involved. There's got to be something to do with what's in the pouch. We don't know what's in the pouch, right? That strikes me as really
well. What Harry talked about with the promo for next episode, which I haven't seen, but I found shocking, the idea that the mystics talk to the stranger and say, you are Sauron. It evidences that it could occur within the universe that a Maiar would not know who they are, and they'd have to be told, and that third parties, the mystics, understand that.
You've reminded me. That's the other thing I think we need to get progress on by the end of the season is who the stranger is. I think we do need.
Yeah,
indeed.
Yeah, season 2 is so far in the future that they really can't end on a tease. They have to have a fair amount of closure, I would say, with most of the storylines.
They have to have some teases, but it can't be all teases, right? We have to have a lot of closure. Some of the mystery boxes, at least one, has to be like fully closed. I would think.
I think the stranger one will be a very big reveal. I think if there's one that's going to be revealed for sure, or at least in like a very almost completely obvious way, is going to be the stranger. And I think the second one, like Mike, we talked about last week, right? How do we get Halbrand to Eregion if he's indeed Sauron?
Yeah.
And well, guess what? He needs elvish medicine. He's about to die, but he's going to ride across half of Middle Earth to the one of the elven realms. I mean, that's one way to get him to Eregion, for example. And I think from the promo material that we got, I think that actually all of them, like even Gilgalad, I think they are all actually in a region. And I think there's also a forging scene in the promo material. So I think we may, because let's not forget, Elrond has that one piece of mithril with him. So I think
they're forging something else.
Yeah, I think they will indeed forge at least one ring, or start to forge. We're gonna really get we're gonna get a ring either this episode or the first episode of the next season or something. I think it's gonna be very clear that they're really to work on this. Whether it's one of the lesser rings, that's a question. May not be so, but it's a big question. Like, we know that Halbrand or like Sauron never touched the 3 elven rings. So if he is there, maybe he will arrive as the ring is being made. He will not participate in that one, or like maybe or maybe not in all 3 elven rings if they make all 3 of them at the end of the season, start of the next one. But as he recuperates from his whatever that injury is, he stays there, and then maybe he helps with the other rings, maybe something like that, or it could be just one of the lesser rings. But I think we're definitely starting to work on this.
I don't think they're melting the mithril ingot. I think they're melting Galadriel's dagger to make whatever it is they're making.
Ooh.
Okay, that would be interesting.
Ouch. That would be really...
She looks at it so pensively in so many shots of the previews.
Oh yeah, there is...
like she's making peace with parting with the thing that is
you think she willingly gives it up? I think she willingly gives it up.
I think somewhat reluctantly, but still, like that it's it's her last, like it's a totem sort of
yeah.
And she has to part with it because it's from Valinor or some sort of malarkey, and they need to make it into
I like that.
It's in the shape of the 2 trees. It's in the shape of the 2 trees. So it partly has that power. Yes, exactly.
Oh, I like that idea. Well, just from in terms of the way it relates to her emotional arc, we got a nice little super chat here that asks, "What about Adar? What will happen to him? By the way, can we all acknowledge now that he's basically the creator of Mordor and Sauron is lame?" I fully agree with that diagnosis. But no, that is something that I am really interested in as well. We haven't mentioned. I mean, Adar, I think, is a fan favorite. I think he's the one character that everyone universally agrees has just been awesome. Well acted, very interesting. All the scenes are great. We know he's alive.
The concept is very successful. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So, do you think we will see anything of Adar in the last episode? Are they just going to kind of leave him by the wayside, follow the other characters, and he'll, we know he's alive, so they'll just bring him back in season 2? Or is he going to be a player in whatever occurs in season 8 or in episode 8? And Harry, I'll go to you.
If he's, I'm pretty sure he's dead in the next episode. I think that is the way they'll probably go for it. I'm not saying that as confirmed. I'm saying that. Actually, fair, Joseph Morley did even make a tweet that Elendil had to take down. Where he basically speaks like his time is over, playing the character. But I think you can't have two people. You can't have a Sauron and then someone else who is the villain. There has to only be one villain. It seems like we've seen so far Sauron and Adar, they don't like each other. Or they don't like, there can only be one, true person full of evil. If, Anatar's going to end up doing whatever he's doing, well, Sauron, as Anatar's going to end up doing whatever he's doing in Eregion, how we would be doing that knowing that there's a king in the Southlands who's basically amassing all the orcs? Like, he's going to need to solve that first. So, and if Halbrand is, Sauron, whether or not, maybe a confrontation between the two could result in Adar's legacy, however way. But I really find it hard seeing him survive in this season, I'll be honest. So that's my initial way I take. And also, thank you for the $10 super chat from Corey Castle. I think Valking did one as well. Appreciate it. I think he says sorry to the fans of the show. It was $2 post about Team Adar. Hell no, he's the only villain, a character I want to survive. Oops, sorry. That's actually the worst thing to read out right now. So, back to you.
Well,
I think I just want to agree. Adar is absolutely amazing. He and the orcs were one of the stellar constants of the show so far. Like, every scene Adar is in, he absolutely steals the show. And the whole plot around the orcs, I think it's very well done. And all the payoff that they got, I think it's earned throughout, because they set up the digging of the tunnels the whole time. They were searching for the sword. They were doing this for Adar, and we know why they love him so much. Like, that's literally that. Orcs actually love someone. It's this guy who acts as a father and who is very protective, but he's also like, he is one, honestly, for me, I was saying that to a friend today, Adar is one of the most fun things I've ever seen so far regarding the entirety of Middle-earth, because we here see an elf who is also an orc, or as he would say, Uruk, and he's struggling between those two, and we never saw that. And even Tolkien had like so many versions and thoughts of what happens with orc. Do they have a soul? Are they this? Like, are they that? We see this discrepancy between in the conversation between Galadriel and Adar. She's like, no, you're mindless beasts, you're abominations, or whatever. He's like, no, we are also the children of the One. I think they absolutely knocked it out of the park with orcs and Adar in every possible sense. Like 11 out of 10. And I hope he will stick around as much as possible.
And to add to that, I think with the whole with the thing with Adar, I'm really, really happy that he's one of the favorites, because I think the chance I've had to be able to speak to Joseph Moll, he's absolutely a brilliant person. I think it's a shame with the marketing we haven't seen him speak really or do interviews, etc. But I think you can see with some of his public posts, he really does understand and goes really in depth. And I'm just he's just a great person. I'm really happy that that people, we got a super chat saying how much they don't want him to die, and I think if that does unfortunately if it happens in the next episode, I think it's going to be the people say the show's too scared to kill off characters. I think that would be quite an interesting one to kill off if that is his resolution. I'm not saying it is, but a high possibility.
I agree. Yeah. Of the concepts introduced in this season, which would be the Mithril, the creation of Mordor, the sympathy kind of for the orcs or these renegade orcs. This one is easily the most successful. So yeah, very, very interesting. And yeah, I agree that he kind of has to die. Yeah.
At some point for sure, but hopefully not in this season.
There is a chance that he isn't, because it seems that all the major characters, the ones that have been labeled as major characters, of which Adar is one, survive more than one season. Because if they didn't, or if characters that are strictly in one season would have been labeled as major characters, Waldrake would have been one, because that's absolutely one of the most memorable parts of the show. And one of the biggest, one of the characters that most thrusts the story forward. And, he has more to do than 5 or 6 of the major characters put together. So, but so that's I think all the major characters are characters that are in this for more than one season.
Do any of you think that there's a chance that if Adar survives, and most of what's going on in the chat, most of what has been suggested on this panel is, well, if he survives and he continues to grow in power, he becomes more of a Dark Lord type, is there a chance that his arc is actually one of redemption? They've laid the seeds for potential redemption of orcs.
I think that would be interesting.
Me and Hen have gone so far back and forth over this over the last month.
I think it's possible, but I hate it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have conceptual issues with redemption arcs for villains who do things that are just unredeemable. And Adar, I think it's very easy to take someone like Adar and confuse the sort of pity that we have for him with actual it's like he's still a terrible person, terrible, horrible, abominable, awful individual.
Yes.
Someone's not a fan.
Without any remorse. No. I mean, that's not to say that we shouldn't pity him. But he absolutely is an awful individual who kills without any remorse.
I don't know. I don't think that's the case. I think he did. I have to disagree there. He did give a chance to people to go away or join him or whatever. So I think as far as villains go, that's one way to do it. And he took in Waldrag, and he was like, okay, I'm going to give you, like the guy who just joined my side, I am going to give you the most important task I've ever given to anyone, which is creating Muldoon. So I don't know. I wouldn't mind seeing a redemption arc for him. And actually, I proposed this idea in the previous weeks.
I think it cheapens the evil.
Yeah, but he doesn't have to be. He doesn't have to get redemption. He can stay the anti-hero. He can stay even an evil type of person. But I could see. I'm not saying I want to see this, but it would be cool to have. It's an interesting idea to have a tribe of orcs fighting against Sauron in the Battle of the Last Alliance. And that's, again, I mentioned it before, it's based on a technicality that says all the races were divided on, when it was in the Battle of the Last Alliance, save the elves. So all races. If we're going by that line, technically it's possible that some of the orcs fought against Sauron. And I'm not saying it's going to happen. I don't think they have time to go into this as well. But it would be like, they don't have to redeem them. But Sauron is the oppressor. It could be the sort of enemy of my enemy is my friend, which is like the elves and the men. So I could see that, and I'm not sure I wouldn't mind. I would mind that, because Adar is just so fantastic. I don't know.
I don't think Adar can survive all 5 seasons, but I think he will survive. I think he will survive more than episode 8, because we need to still establish Sauron's connection to Mordor, and we also need to establish Barad-dûr. And I think it'll be really interesting. Maybe we'll see the beginnings of Barad-dûr's foundation in episode 8 as well. But there's still, I think, a role for Adar in season 2, perhaps as part of a transition of power. Once the rings of power, once the One Ring has been forged and Sauron actually reveals himself to be Sauron, not Anatar, that might be a good opportunity. That's the point at which Adar needs to fade, if Adar does fade or get killed or whatever.
And I agree. And also, as Corey Castle says, I think I agree in some regards. I think for the super chat again, thank you. Soldiers fighting for your freedom and homeland have killed much more and have statues. Also, how do you justify without remorse, judgment? And again, if it's everybody, there's battles all the time. I don't want to say people kill us in our fight. I'm not saying that, but it also goes to the fact is Adar inherently evil? If he was one of the first elves that got twisted, was it his choice that he's now ended up having to do this? And I think you take that aspect of that evil character and being able to play with it and toy with it, I think it's psychologically quite an interesting take, knowing that the final evil is still not him, is Sauron. And I think
but he's still evil.
Well, but it's fight for survival, I think, in my opinion.
It's absolutely impossible to call Adar anything other than evil.
I very much disagree with that.
That he's understandable and pitiable does not make him less evil.
I very much disagree. He's fighting for survival.
You can
in my opinion.
He's not evil. Yeah. He is evil. But then it's the fact that if it's his choice or not, and that's the reason why you can at least feel pity or sorrow. And then if he does end up, seeing the wrongs of his ways or trying to improve for the better, you're not going to go suddenly go, okay, he's great now, he's perfect, do whatever. It's at least having that moral understanding that it's more complex than him just, going out one day, killing people for fun because he's psychotic, because he's crazy, because that is layers of how he originally got captured, one of the first elves, and how that works out. And of course, yes, he's killing human villagers and there's battles happen. And I think there's just a psychological understanding that you can break down to not make him, have a full redemption arc, but you can delve more into the character.
Yeah, sure. But redemption arcs usually are like, oh, he dies and he kind of sort of earns his absolution in death. I don't want that either. I just don't want a martyric death for him.
Mike, what do you think of Adar?
Evil.
No, I think that's a good point. And I've been kind of smiling and sitting back here. I accidentally, we got a question here that really got people energized right at the end. But it is one of the more fascinating issues. I mean, we spent a lot of time talking about it in the last episode where they sort of introduced the origins of the orcs and this notion of the gray in them, narratively, and then the origins. So I think Hand Touch's really important point is that when we talk about redemption, we can't be talking about absolution. At no point can they say like, it's okay, Adar, with the things that you did because we pity you. Those are kind of two different issues. But
yes,
it is also very important that there is gray to his character, and in that, the show has to do a good job of contrasting him with Sauron, who is to be the true evil in the show. I mean, even Sauron in theory, there's some gray to him as well in the text, but I think in the show, they could go in different directions, but the gray in Adar has to be in contrast to the pure black of Sauron. And I think that we will see that because when Sauron comes back, we know that he enslaved the orcs, whereas the orcs follow Adar willingly. And so if Sauron defeats Adar, a big part of that is he's going to be re-enslaving the orcs. And we have to see that. I would be very disappointed if Adar dies and the orcs just turn and bow to their new leader and there's no issue there. They've established that the orcs were tortured, they were killed, they were subjugated by Sauron. And there has to be a pitiable moment, another one where we pity the orcs again because they're being subjugated by Sauron. And I think that's going to be the key moment of contrast, because Adar is going to be so sad because these are his children and he loves them. And we're going to pity him in that moment. He's still evil and the things that he's done are evil, but I think we're going to have a very kind of emotional moment where we see where we pity Adar because of his loss and he has some good inside of him, even though it fueled heinous acts. Sauron's going to come in as the big black, bad daddy and just show us how bad can be.
Yeah, I think he's marching towards a very like epic anti-hero death scene. Like, Sauron shows up, kills Adar in a duel, and then just uses the ring to enslave the orcs. And I think more or less that's how it's going to end for him, which I think it's going to be cool. I think they did a really good job of, which this debate clearly shows, that people will care about him. Like, I'm not saying he's good, I'm not saying he's redeemable, but there's, as you said, there's definitely a lot of gray to him and a lot of potential for like this anti-hero type of thing, which we don't have a lot of those, I think. I mean, you can argue that there's anti-heroes, but I don't think anyone is like this clearly in the middle from good and bad as Adar. That's why I said I think for me he's one of the most fascinating things in the entirety of Middle Earth lore and whatever. I mean, this is not lore, but this is like a show. He's absolutely fantastic because he's literally in the middle. Like he puts the seeds in the ground. He does the same ritual before the battle. That's like a pray to life, despite of that Arondir does like 10 minutes afterwards. That's absolutely amazing for me. So yeah, I'm hoping he gets a very epic end.
And I think again, if we're able to explore that, it's one of the most interesting aspects of it, because you can't just write him off as evil, bad, this is that. When you have the rich. Okay, let's read out Corey Castle's. Actually, no, that just makes that, because Hen actually has served in the army, so that ruins that. Anyways, they say you guys keep saying even heinous. Anyone on the panel ever served in war? Swords or carpet bombs? What's the difference? I think the point they're trying to make there that even with the earlier one with the Galadriel saying, like, what's worse than saying she's going to commit basically a mass genocide in front of, they're saying that in front of Adar. I think that it just adds the fact that and how many times in history have you seen even humans, just people they are trying to survive, and that's his way of surviving. And I think, I'm not saying he's going to be now he's going to be like Elendil, he's going to be loved, revered. That's not going to happen. Whenever you kill someone and take away his people's homes or whatever, that it's inevitable. You're never going to be fully redeemed. But being able to explore that and at least see an insight into how that results in Adar at least seeing from a moral understanding how his character works, and how he's just trying to find a home for his children. If you think of that as regards, he's trying to do what is best for his race and for his people, his children, to survive. And then if you put it like that, you can delve into that. And that's why Strider for you is one of the most interesting aspects of the show. And writing it off as just, evil, bad, kill most people. Okay, killing's happening all the time. It's happening throughout history.
Evil can be perfectly understandable and very pitiable and very sort of rationally justifiable. That doesn't make it less evil. If anything, it makes it more. But
I'm not saying it's less evil. I'm saying you can explore an other side of it. You can explore how, that's evil, but even for the most evil things, that is still good in it. Because that relates back to his character.
Yeah.
He was twisted himself. He's still enough putting the seeds at the start of the battle. And just same as Adar. And I think being able to see that him being good doesn't make him less evil. But exactly, even saying evil is like, even Duff Dog says it, evil is an overused word. There's a nuance with this character. There is a nuance with the character.
Yes.
And I think being able to see, of course, the more virtuous things that he is trying to, make a place for his family, for his people. If the show explores that, it's an interesting thing for the character and it's quite compelling, something we really haven't seen in these adaptations.
So I think if there's one thing we can all agree on is that this show is touching on themes that are very, very meaningful, that Tolkien explored, and that it's getting people to have conversations like this that are very difficult. I mean, there's no simple answer. A lot of what we talked about the lore, and there may be easier answers, but this is getting to very core issues that are hard for anybody to tackle. So I think this is just the beginning of the conversation, not the end. And I do hope that they deal with the Adar storyline and the Orc storyline with, delicately and smartly, because it is touching on some of the most important themes that the show will be dealing with for whether or not he lasts for 5 seasons. It's going to be setting up some important stuff for a couple seasons. So I'm looking forward to that and talking about it more with everybody. We are getting on the back end closer to 4 hours and 3 hours. So let's go ahead and call it, I think. Strider, I've done this every week, and I want to kind of throw it to you. Were there any Fellowship of Fans, and we got Harry on here too. Are there any Fellowship of Fans leaks that proved to be correct in episode 7 that you'd like to take a victory lap on?
think so.
Yeah, Harry can maybe answer this one since he's here.
As in regards to leaks, I think we're going with episode 7, episode 8. There's always going to be less than that. But I do think the whole aspect of, we spoke about a human village. Oh my god, these lights do my head in. What's it called? A village that they've been filmed in for months and months, and we learned that nearly like millions and millions, well not millions, but like worth of resources were burnt down, villages burnt, then they were built again, and now we can understand why that's happened, because they've used it, they've used it for, the Tirharad villages burning. So that was a big core theme. And I think we did touch on, but we didn't officially reveal Miriel's blindness. The fact that when coming to Middle-earth, it may not be the best scenario. So yeah, I think those are the two main things. But I do think for these next few episodes, we're going to see less and less, because these are really secretive. And yes, I'm seeing in chat, for Harry to come to the light, he has to first touch the darkness. Fair enough.
Well, I want to thank all the panelists, especially everybody from Fellowship of Fans and Harry, for joining us for the first time. And kudos to you for making this stream living performance art, where you're playing out the themes of light and dark that the show really I appreciate your commitment. And special thanks to James Tauber. James, why don't you tell everybody where they can find you? I already mentioned the Rings wrap up, but you got a number of other projects that I think are really worth checking out for Tolkien fans.
Yeah, so certainly in terms of sort of content creation generally, relating to the show, you mentioned Rings of Power wrap-up, the podcast that I'm on with Alan Sisto and Sarah Brown. But also I run the Digital Tolkien Project, which is a scholarly project that does sort of computational analysis of the texts of Tolkien, primarily the books. But I also dabble a little bit in things like the subtitle files from the TV show and also the Peter Jackson film. So do a little bit of stuff there. You can find me at digitaltolkien.com. It's the main project site, and also on Twitter as Digital Tolkien.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's great. And a profoundly helpful resource for anybody who really wants to explore
Absolutely.
the text. I mean, the things you can do.
It helps.
Lots
it helps
more coming,
when you're like
lots more coming, by the way.
It helps so much when you're like in an argument with someone. That's the main usage. You just you don't think that person was mentioned in the Lord of the Rings. Okay, just a second, and then you go and that helped quite a few times in the past month and a half, I have to say.
It helps.
Glad to hear it.
It's good.
Well, of course, after this stream is over, you can come back and listen to it on YouTube. We'll also be putting out the audio from these panels in our podcast stream at the Watch Party Network. Watch Party Lord of the Rings. We'll have the Newbie panel in a separate episode and this lore panel in a separate episode, so you can listen to it in your car or wherever. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I think we're getting ready to do our raffle now, and I want to announce the winner. Thank everybody for their super chats. As always, really appreciate your contributions. Our big winner today is Corey Castle. So thank you so much. And we'll get in touch with you, or you get in touch with us on Twitter, and we'll coordinate with the Nerdy Alchemist to make sure you get your winnings. And for anybody who didn't win and wants to get some stickers or some fun gifts, you can please support the Nerdy Alchemist. Go to their shop. You can get a discount code for 20% off at ROP Watch Party, ROP Watch Party, to get 20% off anything at their store. So that'll do it for us. Thank you, everybody. Join us next week. We'll be breaking down the season finale. I can't wait. Also, I'm very sad that it's ending. So
well put.
So thanks to the
we
panel.
can always
Thanks
do
again,
a retrospective kind of recap.
We will do that. I think we will definitely do that. We'll have an extra episode
at least
after
once,
the finale,
because you want to have some perspective on it.
Yeah. I think
we'll be back.
They'll have to tie us down to get us to not do that. So we'll be back.
Yeah.
All right. I think that'll do it. Thank you, everybody. Kyle, you can go ahead and take us out. Yeah, that was great. Thanks again, James. And thanks for sticking around. These always go a little bit longer than